Hey there. Before we begin, you should be in a position that is comfortable to you, and you can let us know in the comments where in the world you are and what is the current time for you. There's a reason why most pirate stories leave out the smell. You're crammed into a wooden ship with a couple dozen other scallywags, and let's just say deodorant wasn't part of the standard pirate kit. Your living quarters are a masterpiece of claustrophobia, each hammock slung so close to the next that you can practically borrow your neighbour's dream if you wanted to. Forget your king-size bed and personal space. Here, you're lucky if your feet don't end up in someone else's face. Welcome to pirate life, where the luxury you're used to is traded for a perpetual game of sardines, only with more scurvy. And speaking of scurvy, let's talk about the menu. Imagine a diet so questionable that even a fast food junkie would start longing for a green salad. Your meals consist of hardtack, a kind of bread that's more suitable for construction than consumption. It's not uncommon to see your fellow buccaneers using it as a mug coaster. And don't even get me started on the salted meat. It's been around longer than some of the crew. The piece de resistance? A drink called grog, a delightful cocktail of rum, water and lime juice, designed more for survival than savouring. All this just to keep you from dropping dead from malnutrition or dehydration. Bon appetit. Now, on to the glittering allure of pirate treasure. Hold your horses, Captain Jack Sparrow. While popular legend would have you believe the seas are full of chests overflowing with gold doubloons, the reality is a bit less shiny. Most of the time, you're plundering ships for mundane necessities like rope, cloth, and the occasional barrel of rum. The treasure? More scrap metal than gold. Sometimes you might get lucky and snag a few pieces of 8 or a bit of silver, but no one's retiring to a tropical island on those spoils. But why endure all this? The economic motivation, my friend. For many, piracy was a desperate alternative to a life of poverty on land. While the potential rewards were indeed enticing, the grim reality of the pirate economy was a constant gamble. You might hit the jackpot one day, but more often than not, it's a hand-to-mouth existence. It's better than being a broke sailor under the king's thumb, but let's not pretend it's the Caribbean dream. And if you think signing up for a pirate crew is your ticket to democratic freedom, think again. Pirate democracy is a myth that's been romanticized over centuries. Sure, some ships had a vote on major decisions, but the captain held the real power, ruling with a mix of fear and charisma. You're not exactly participating in a floating version of Athens. Captains like Blackbeard and Bartholomew Roberts might have consulted their crew, but make no mistake, they were the ones calling the shots. It's more my way or the plank than by the people, for the people. Still, the allure of the pirate life remains. It's the ultimate tale of rebellion against the establishment, a big middle finger to the powers that be. But behind the swashbuckling romance lies a harsh truth. A life of uncertainty, hardship, and the ever-present risk of meeting the hangman's noose. So, while you might dream of the pirate's freedom, remember that for every tale of treasure, there's 100 stories of hardship. Welcome aboard, matey. And as if navigating the perils of piracy wasn't daunting enough, let's turn our attention to the less glamorous side of life on the high seas, staying alive and in one piece. Now, you might think that the ocean air with its salty tang would do wonders for your health. Well, think again. Out here, a simple splinter could become a death sentence faster than you could say, "Ah." You see, in the 1700s, antibiotics were as mythical as mermaids, and the Grim Reaper had a knack for hitching a ride on even the smallest wound. Picture this. You're swabbing the deck, minding your own business, when a stray shard of wood makes itself at home under your skin. In a world without penicillin, that little piece of lumber could invite a whole host of infections, from tetanus to gangrene. The latter, by the way, isn't a new dance move, but a gruesome condition where tissues just up and die. Without proper medical care, and by that I mean anything more sophisticated than a hasty amputation with the ship's dullest saw, you're looking at a fast track to Davy Jones's locker. But let's not forget the pirate's arch nemesis, scurvy. Ah, yes, the disease that makes you yearn for an orange like it's the Holy Grail. Caused by a lack of vitamin C, scurvy turned healthy sailors into walking corpses. Gums would bleed, teeth would fall out, and old wounds would reopen like some sort of horror film. The British Navy would later crack the code with citrus, but pirates weren't so lucky. The ship's surgeon, often also the cook, navigator, and occasional deck swabber, was usually left scratching his head over a bunch of wilted herbs and a dubious understanding of anatomy. Speaking of surgeons, these guys were the Swiss Army knives of the sea, in the loosest sense. Most pirate ships couldn't afford a real doctor, so the role often fell to someone with a steady hand and a strong stomach. Forget diplomas. The only qualification you needed was the ability to hold your lunch while cutting off someone else's leg. With rum as anesthetic and sawdust as a sterile field, surgery was less Grey's Anatomy and more Saw the Six. If you were lucky, you'd pass out before the pain hit. Now, if the threat of disease and infection didn't keep you on your toes, the ship's justice system would. Pirates were a rough bunch, and maintaining order required a code as harsh as the sea itself. Forget about due process. On a pirate ship, justice was swift and brutal. Steal from your crewmates? You might find yourself marooned on some godforsaken isle with nothing but a bottle of water and your regrets for company. Or worse, you could be keel-hauled, a punishment so terrifying it sounds made up. Dragged under the ship's barnacle-encrusted hull, you'd emerge either dead or wishing you were. On top of that, piracy was a career fraught with betrayal. Mutiny wasn't just a thrilling plot twist in your favorite pirate flick, it was a real threat. Captains had to rule with an iron fist, or at least the promise of fair shares and even-handed discipline. But step out of line, and you might find yourself on the wrong end of a cat-o'-nine-tails. A dozen lashes could be enough to send a warning, while more serious offences could see you swinging from the yardarm. Still, amid all the chaos, there was a strange sense of camaraderie. Pirates, after all, were bound by the same grim fate, and a code that, while harsh, offered a semblance of order in an otherwise lawless life. Sure, the pirate's life was brutal and often short, but in that shared hardship there was an unspoken bond. It was a brotherhood forged not in gold, but in survival. So, as you imagine the life of a pirate, remember that beneath the allure of adventure and freedom lies a world that's as unforgiving as the sea itself. Stay tuned, because this voyage is far from over. But let's dive deeper into what really held this ragtag bunch of sea rebels together, the pirate code. No, not the take what you can, give nothing back mantra from Hollywood blockbusters, but the actual nitty-gritty rules that made sure a ship didn't devolve into chaos. You see, the pirate code was like the constitution of the high seas, only with more rum and less parchment. It was less about ethics and more about survival, a pragmatic guide to ensure that everyone got their fair slice of the pie. Or, in this case, the stolen goods. Now, before you start thinking that pirates were just anarchists with boats, let me stop you right there. These guys were early adopters of democracy in a world where kings and queens called the shots. Most pirate ships had a written code, a set of rules agreed upon by the crew, and believe it or not, everyone got a say. Well, everyone whose voice could be heard above the crashing waves and the occasional gunfire. At the heart of the pirate code was the loot. Forget about treasure chests overflowing with gold. This was about dividing whatever goods were plundered in a way that kept mutiny at bay. The captain might get a double share, the quartermaster a share and a half, but every crew member had a stake. This was an early form of profit sharing, a stark contrast to the rigid hierarchies of naval ships where a sailor's reward for a job well done was maybe not getting flogged that day. But it wasn't just the loot that kept things running smoothly. The code also covered conduct. Think of it like a medieval HR policy, only with more violence. Fighting on board? That could cost you a share of the loot, or worse, a marooning on some god-forsaken spit of land. And if you were caught cheating your mates at dice, you might just find yourself on the receiving end of some pirate justice, swift and brutal. And then there were the rules about combat. A pirate ship was a floating fortress, and everyone had to pull their weight. No shirking your duties mid-battle. The code laid down that if you flinched in the face of the enemy, you'd better be prepared to face the consequences. In a world where survival depended on every hand on deck, cowardice was a luxury no one could afford. Speaking of luxury, let's talk about the social dynamics aboard these ships. Pirates were the original melting pot, a motley crew of runaway slaves, deserters, and adventurers from every corner of the world. You might find a former British sailor rubbing shoulders with an escaped African slave, both united by a shared disdain for the oppressive powers that had driven them to the sea. This wasn't just about survival. It was a meritocracy before the term even existed. Your background didn't matter. What counted was your skill with a cutlass, or your knack for navigation. In a world divided by class and race, pirate ships were a peculiar anomaly. Here, a man's worth was measured not by his lineage, but by his ability to contribute to the crew's success. This was a stark contrast to the rigid class structures that ruled the mainland, where your birth determined your lot in life. On board a pirate ship, however, a lowly deckhand could rise to the rank of quartermaster if he proved his mettle. Of course, all this talk of equality aboard pirate ships doesn't mean it was all sunshine and rainbows. The life of a pirate was still brutal and short, and the democracy they practiced was often more pragmatic than idealistic. Yet, it offered a glimmer of hope in an otherwise grim world, a place where the downtrodden could, at least for a time, thumb their noses at the establishment. But let's not get too carried away with the romance of it all. For every pirate who dreamt of freedom and fortune, there were plenty more who simply saw it as a means to an end, a desperate attempt to escape the grinding poverty of 18th century life. And while the pirate code might have offered a semblance of order, it was ultimately a survival mechanism, not a manifesto for social change. In essence, pirate ships were less about the pursuit of an ideal and more about pragmatic cooperation. They were microcosms of human society, stripped down to their barest essentials. In a world where betrayal could be lurking around every corner, the pirate code was the glue that held it all together. It was a delicate balance of power, one that could tip into chaos at a moment's notice, but somehow managed to keep afloat. So, while you might be drawn to the myth of the freedom-loving pirate, remember that beneath the allure of adventure lay a world governed by necessity. The pirate code wasn't just a set of rules, it was a lifeline, a way to navigate the treacherous waters of both the ocean and human nature. And as history has shown us time and again, when survival's on the line, people will find ways to work together, even if it means bending a few rules along the way. Stay tuned, because our voyage through the world of piracy is far from over. But speaking of bending rules, let's dive into the logistical nightmare that was navigating a pirate ship. Picture this. You're on the high seas, and your GPS is a star chart that's as reliable as a pirate's promise. That's right, navigation back then was a mix of art, science, and a touch of pirate intuition. Without the luxury of modern technology, pirates relied heavily on the stars, the sun, and occasionally a well-thumbed copy of The English Pilot to figure out where they were going. But even the best-laid plans were often subject to the whims of the sea. A storm could throw you miles off course, and a compass might betray you with the same ease as a mutinous crew member. And if navigating the ocean wasn't enough of a hassle, there was always the looming threat of the Royal Navy. These guys were the party crashers of the pirate world, constantly on the hunt to put a damper on the buccaneer festivities. The Navy ships were bigger, faster, and armed to the teeth. They were like the IRS of the seas, always ready to collect their dues in the form of pirate scalps. Pirates had to be light on their feet, rudder, to avoid capture, often relying on speed and the element of surprise to outrun their pursuers. It was an endless game of cat and mouse, one that required cunning and a fair bit of luck. Now, let's talk about the economics of keeping a pirate ship afloat, literally and figuratively. You might think that pirates, being the original financial outlaws, wouldn't have to worry about money. Oh, how wrong you'd be. Ships were expensive to maintain, and a pirate captain had to be part sailor, part accountant. Repairs could cost a small fortune, especially after a particularly rough battle or a close encounter with a coral reef. A new sail could set you back about 100 pieces of eight, a hefty sum when you consider that many pirates didn't live to see their next payday. And then there's the little matter of bribing officials. You see, piracy wasn't just a matter of plundering ships, it was an entire business ecosystem. Port officials, governors, and even local merchants could be persuaded to look the other way, for a price, of course. Bribes were as much a part of the pirate economy as rum and hardtack, and the cost could be steep. In places like Nassau, a haven for pirates during the Golden Age, greasing the right palms could mean the difference between a warm welcome and a hangman's noose. Speaking of nooses, let's debunk the romantic myth of buried treasure. Sure, it makes for a great story, who doesn't love a good treasure map with an X marking the spot? But in reality, pirates weren't in the habit of stashing their spoils in secluded spots. The reason? Liquid assets were the lifeblood of piracy. You needed cash to pay your crew, fix your ship, and plan your next raid. Burying treasure was like throwing your savings into a hole and hoping you remember where you left it, not exactly a sound financial strategy. Instead, pirates preferred to spend their loot quickly, often in the nearest port with the most vibrant drinking establishments. A pirate's idea of a retirement plan was more about living large today rather than worrying about tomorrow. This spendthrift mentality meant that most pirates died as they lived, recklessly, with little more than a few coins to their name. And let's not forget the practical need for resources like food, ammunition, and fresh water. These were the real treasures, more valuable than gold when you're weeks away from land. Pirates would often raid not just for riches but for supplies, taking whatever they could use and leaving the rest to sink or swim. This was survival in its rawest form, an economy driven by immediate need rather than long-term gain. But what about those infamous pirate flags fluttering in the breeze? You know, the skull and crossbones that screamed, "Here be trouble." These weren't just for show, they were psychological warfare at its finest. The sight of the Jolly Roger was often enough to make a merchant vessel surrender without a fight, saving pirates the hassle of a drawn-out battle. This was piracy as a business model, intimidation as a tool for efficiency. The logistics of a pirate voyage were a constant balancing act of risk and reward, with every decision carrying the weight of potential disaster. It was a world where the stakes were high and the margins for error were razor-thin. Pirates had to be shrewd operators willing to adapt to the unpredictable nature of both the sea and human behavior. Yet, for all the challenges, the allure of the pirate life persisted. It was a siren call for those willing to trade certainty for the chance at wealth and adventure. The romance of the pirate myth lives on, even as the reality reveals a life of hardship and danger. But isn't that the draw? A life untethered by the rules of the land, where fortune favours the bold, or at least the foolhardy. In the end, the pirate's life was a paradox, a quest for freedom shackled by the very chains of survival. It was a world where every sunrise brought new opportunities and new threats, where the line between legend and reality blurred with every cresting wave. So, as we sail toward the next chapter of this swashbuckling saga, remember, the seas may be vast, but they offer no guarantees. Stay tuned, matey. The adventure is just getting started. So, as we sail toward the next chapter of this swashbuckling saga, remember, the seas may be vast, but they offer no guarantees. And just as the tides change, so too did the fate of piracy. By the early 18th century, the golden age of piracy was beginning to tarnish like cheap silver. The days of buccaneers ruling the waves were numbered, thanks in large part to political shifts and those pesky naval patrols that just wouldn't quit. Let's dive into the nitty-gritty of this decline. Picture the early 1700s. European powers were finally fed up with pirates treating the sea lanes like their personal playground. Britain, for instance, realized that having pirates pillage its trading fleets wasn't exactly good for business. So, they ramped up naval patrols, deploying warships like the HMS Enterprise to hunt down these maritime miscreants. And they weren't just playing tag, they were playing for keeps. Captured pirates were often hanged as a warning to others. Edward Teach, better known as Blackbeard, met his end this way in 1718, his head famously displayed on a pike as a grim deterrent. But it wasn't just brute force that spelled doom for the pirate way of life. The political landscape was shifting like quicksand beneath their feet. The War of Spanish Succession, 1701 to 1714, had ended, and with it the demand for privateers, those legally sanctioned pirates who operated under the guise of patriotism. Without letters of marque providing a thin veneer of respectability, many privateers found themselves out of a job, and those who turned to outright piracy faced the full wrath of the law. Economically, piracy became less viable too. As European nations strengthened their colonial holdings, they fortified key ports and trade routes, making it harder for pirates to attack and easier for them to get caught. The economy of piracy, once a tempting alternative for the impoverished, became a high-risk, low-reward venture. The allure of the pirate life was fading faster than a sunset over the Caribbean. Yet, the myth of piracy endured, buoyed by tales of treasure maps and daring do. Why? Because who doesn't love a good rebel story? Pirates were the ultimate outlaws, thumbing their noses at the establishment in a way that still resonates today. They were rock stars of the high seas, living fast and dying young. The romance of rebellion is a heady brew, potent enough to overshadow the grim reality of disease, betrayal, and a neck permanently accessorized by a noose. You see, the myths that pirates left behind are far richer than any loot. They've influenced everything from literature to fashion. Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island, published in 1883, cemented the image of the pirate as a lovable rogue with a parrot on his shoulder and a thirst for adventure. And let's not forget the modern cinematic swashbucklers like Captain Jack Sparrow, who made eyeliner and a devil-may-care attitude the ultimate in cool. Pirates even left their mark on language. Shiver me timbers might not have been uttered on the decks of the Queen Anne's Revenge, but phrases like 3 sheets to the wind and showing your true colours have nautical roots that harken back to pirate days. Their legacy is woven into the fabric of our culture, a testament to the enduring charm of the rogue. But let's not gloss over the reality that the pirate life was less about freedom and more about survival. It was a gritty existence, where camaraderie was born out of necessity, not choice. The pirate code, that vaunted set of rules, was less about democracy and more about keeping a volatile crew from tearing itself apart. It was a world where the sword was mightier than the pen, and where the only law was the law of the sea. In the end, the decline of piracy was inevitable. The world was changing, tightening its grip on the oceans and squeezing out room for renegades. Yet, the legacy of piracy remains, a tantalizing blend of fact and fiction that continues to captivate our imaginations. It's a reminder of the human spirit's unquenchable thirst for freedom and adventure, even in the face of overwhelming odds. So, as you drift off to sleep, let your mind wander to those days of yore when the horizon was a promise and the sea was an untamed frontier. Remember that behind every legend lies a kernel of truth, and that sometimes the greatest treasure isn't found on a map, but in the stories we tell. The pirate's life may have been a harsh reality, but its myths are a testament to the enduring power of adventure and the timeless appeal of the rebel without a cause. Sweet dreams, Mate, and may your own adventures be just as bold. In the dusty cradle of civilization, where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers engaged in their timeless tango, the Sumerians were busy inventing something that would outlive their empire by a few millennia: education. Now, you might think that in a world sans smartphones and Netflix there wouldn't be much need for formal schooling, but the Sumerians had other ideas. Around 2000 BCE, they decided that wrangling clay tablets was a skill worth teaching, and thus the world's first schools were born. These early scholars weren't just the ancient equivalent of modern-day hipsters with a penchant for artisanal crafts. They were laying down the very foundation of literate society. Why the sudden burst of scholarly ambition? It turns out the Sumerians had a bit of an obsession with literacy. Picture this: a society where reading and writing weren't just party tricks, but essential skills for economic survival. The Sumerians had invented cuneiform, a script carved into clay that looked more like a series of traffic signs than a language. This wasn't your everyday doodling. Cuneiform was the key to managing the complex economy of Sumer, which boasted vast agricultural networks, trade routes, and bureaucratic demands. In other words, scribes were the unsung heroes, the tech gurus of their day, keeping the wheels of commerce turning. Now, let's talk about those clay tablets. Forget about paper. That was centuries away. In Sumer, clay was all the rage. It was abundant, durable, and just sticky enough to capture the sharp edge of a stylus. If you ever wished for a saves button in life, clay tablets were the next best thing, dried in the sun. These tablets became a permanent record. The Sumerians understood the economic power of information, and they weren't about to let it slip through their fingers. If you could read and write, you could count, calculate taxes, and record transactions, making you indispensable in a trade-heavy society. But hold your stylus before you start romanticizing Sumerian classrooms as egalitarian utopias of learning. Let's take a closer look at the social hierarchy. Education was a privilege, not a right. The sons of wealthy families were the lucky ones admitted to these early schools, known as edilbas, or tablet houses. Picture a room filled with young boys, all sweating over clay, trying to master the intricate strokes of cuneiform. There was no Google to bail them out, just the stern gaze of a teacher who doubled as a priest and a bureaucrat. And if you think your high school math teacher was tough, imagine learning under the watchful eye of someone who could both teach you and decide your fate in the afterlife. So, why all this fuss over literacy? The answer, as always, comes down to money and power. Sumer was a bustling hub of trade, and controlling that trade meant controlling information. Literacy allowed the ruling elite to consolidate power, manage resources, and expand their influence. It wasn't just about writing love letters or keeping diaries. It was about maintaining the very structure of society. The ability to read and write was your ticket to the upper echelons of Sumerian society, where priests and scribes rubbed shoulders with merchants and rulers. The Sumerians may have been the first to formalize education, but they weren't just doing it for the love of learning. They had a vested interest in ensuring that their scribes were well trained and capable of handling the complexities of record-keeping. In a world where a misplaced decimal could mean the difference between feast and famine, accuracy was everything. And so, young boys toiled away, carving their future one cuneiform symbol at a time. It was a tough gig, no doubt, but one that came with the promise of social mobility and, more importantly, a steady paycheck. While the idea of play-based education might sound quaint today, it was nothing short of revolutionary back then. The Sumerians had cracked the code, quite literally, on how to harness the power of the written word to build an empire. And as they scratched away at their tablets, they were unwittingly setting the stage for a world where education would become a cornerstone of civilization, shaping societies and economies across the centuries. So, next time you glance at your smartphone, spare a thought for those ancient scribes. Without them, your texts and tweets might still be etched into clay. So, as you put down your smartphone and ponder the world of clay tablets, let's dive into the daily grind of a Sumerian student. These young lads weren't exactly chilling in beanbag chairs in an air-conditioned classroom. Picture a scene more akin to boot camp, with education served up as a rigorous, no-nonsense affair. The curriculum was less about fostering creativity and more about drilling the fundamentals. Think rote memorization over free-form jazz. The schools, or edubas, weren't exactly the Montessori of Mesopotamia. These were places where young boys, predominantly from affluent families, would gather to become the next generation of scribes. Their days started early, and no one was hitting snooze on a clay alarm clock. The school days was a marathon of learning, starting at sunrise and stretching until the sun dipped below the horizon. Imagine a 9 to 5, but with less coffee and more clay dust. The curriculum was as dry as the tablets they carved. Students spent hours learning cuneiform, which involved memorizing hundreds of symbols. Each symbol could have multiple meanings, making it a linguistic puzzle that only a dedicated scribe could appreciate. And let's not forget the math. Sumerian students had to tackle arithmetic and geometry, skills essential for managing the sprawling Sumerian economy. If you thought your math teacher was harsh, the Sumerians had a system where mistakes were literally set in stone. Now, let's talk about the teachers, who were more drill sergeants than mentors. They were usually priests or bureaucrats, wielding authority like a stylus. Discipline was strict, and let's just say that the concept of the safe space wasn't exactly on the curriculum. If a student made a mistake, the correction was swift and sometimes involved a literal smack on the wrist. It was tough love, ancient Sumer style. Parental expectations were another layer of pressure. Sumerian parents weren't dreaming of their kids becoming rock stars or YouTube influencers. No, they wanted them to climb the social ladder, and literacy was the golden ticket. The hope was that their son would become a scribe, securing a cushy job and elevating the family's status. Imagine the ancient equivalent of parental pressure to get into Harvard, but with clay tablets and cuneiform instead of SAT scores. The societal expectations didn't stop there. Being a scribe was not just a job, it was a status symbol. Scribal positions were highly sought after, and the competition was fierce. The allure of a stable career and the potential for social mobility made the grueling education worth it for many families. But it wasn't all prestige and power. Scribes were also the worker bees of the Sumerian bureaucracy, tasked with recording everything from temple accounts to trade transactions. Despite the harsh conditions, there was a certain romance to the life of a scribe. They were the keepers of knowledge, the ones who held the keys to the kingdom of literacy. In a society where the written word was power, being a scribe was like having a backstage pass to the most exclusive club in Mesopotamia. But let's not sugarcoat it, this was no easy path. The reality was a grind that required dedication, discipline, and a fair amount of play under the fingernails. Yet, for all the toil and trouble, there was an undeniable sense of accomplishment. Mastering cuneiform was akin to cracking a code, and those who succeeded were revered. They were the bridge between oral traditions and the written record, the ones who ensured that the stories of Sumer endured long after the clay tablets had dried. So, as you ponder the idea of education as a path to power, remember the young scribes of Sumer. They were pioneers in an educational system that was as much about survival as it was about learning. Their days were filled with lessons in language and numbers, but also in the harsh realities of societal expectations. Theirs was a world where knowledge truly was power, and every stroke of the stylus brought them closer to that coveted status. The story of Sumerian education is one of ambition, discipline, and a little bit of ancient grit. It's a tale that reminds us that while the tools may have changed, the pursuit of knowledge and the pressures that come with it are as old as civilization itself. Stay tuned for more as we continue to unravel the fascinating world of ancient Sumer, where the past teaches us as much about today as it does about itself. As we journey deeper into the world of Sumerian education, let's take a stroll through the halls, or perhaps the mud-brick corridors of the Ejubars, the so-called schools of the ancient world. Now, if you're picturing ivy-covered buildings with marble floors and state-of-the-art facilities, you're about to get a reality check that even the most optimistic time traveler wouldn't envy. First off, let's talk architecture. The Sumerian schools were about as glamorous as a mud hut on a rainy day. Constructed from sun-dried bricks, these structures were functional at best, boasting the kind of charm that only a minimalist could appreciate. Imagine a boxy, windowless room that made a prison cell look cozy. Yet, for all their lack of aesthetic appeal, these buildings were practical. In a region where temperatures could skyrocket higher than your typical teenager's phone bill, the thick walls kept things relatively cool, or as cool as you could hope for when the sun was trying to melt you into a puddle of sweat. Inside, the classroom setup was equally sparse. Forget about ergonomic chairs or interactive whiteboards. These budding scholars sat on the ground, their backs against the walls, a setup that probably did wonders for their posture. The curriculum was literally etched into the architecture, with walls often doubling as makeshift blackboards. Students would scratch away at wet clay tablets with reed styluses, tools that were the ancient equivalent of an iPad stylus, minus the Bluetooth connection. The styluses were made from reeds collected from the marshes, demonstrating a resourcefulness that modern eco-warriors would applaud. The Ejubars were not just educational hubs, but also social centers. They formed part of the temple complexes, a strategic choice that was less about fostering a love of learning and more about maintaining a tight grip on power. You see, religion and education in Sumer were as intertwined as celebrity and scandal. The temples were the epicenters of Sumerian life, not just as religious sanctuaries, but as economic and administrative hubs. By housing schools within temple grounds, the priesthood ensured that education was under their watchful eye, reinforcing their influence over the population. Now, let's delve into the motives behind this cozy arrangement. The Sumerians didn't just wake up one day and decide to sprinkle some education into their temple practices for kicks. No, this was a calculated move. By teaching literacy and numeracy, the temple priests were effectively training a workforce that could manage the economic machinery of Sumer. In a society where the gods were as integral to daily life as breakfast cereal, this setup ensured that religious authority translated seamlessly into economic control. But why would anyone question this setup when it seemed to work so well? Well, let's just say that the Sumerians didn't exactly have a monopoly on altruism. While the symbiotic relationship between temple and school had its merits, it also had a darker side. The priests, who doubled as teachers, wielded considerable power, and their influence extended far beyond the classroom. Education was a means to an end, a tool for social control that ensured the populace remained loyal to the temple's cause. It was less about fostering critical thinking and more about indoctrination, a way to ensure that the next generation was as beholden to the temple as the last. In this context, the students at the Ejubars were more like apprentices than independent thinkers. They learned not just cuneiform and arithmetic, but also the religious hymns and rituals that reinforced the temple's dominance. The curriculum was a blend of the pragmatic and the divine, with an emphasis on producing scribes who could serve the temple's needs first and foremost. Yet, there's a certain romance in imagining these young scribes hunched over their clay tablets, unknowingly laying the groundwork for future civilizations. They were the custodians of knowledge, the ones who ensured that Sumer's achievements were immortalized in clay, even as they toiled under the watchful eyes of their priestly mentors. It's easy to romanticize this image, but let's not forget the reality. These students were part of a system that prioritized the temple's interests above all else, a reminder that education has always been a double-edged sword. So as we leave the mud-brick corridors of the Ejubas, let's keep in mind the dual nature of Sumerian education. Yes, it was a pioneering step in the history of learning, but it was also a cog in the larger machine of religious and economic power. As we continue to explore the fascinating world of ancient Sumer, remember that the past is a tapestry woven with both idealism and pragmatism, ambition and control. Stay tuned, because there's more to uncover in this tale of ancient education, where every clay tablet holds a story waiting to be told. As we wade deeper into the murky waters of Sumerian education, let's not kid ourselves into thinking it was all clay tablets and enlightenment. The truth is, the Sumerians were as much about social engineering as they were about spreading knowledge. You see, education in ancient Sumer was a bit like an exclusive club. If you didn't have the right connections or a hefty enough dowry, you were left scratching your head outside the temple gates. In a society where social stratification was as rigid as a dried clay tablet, education served as both a ladder and a gatekeeper. The Ejubes weren't exactly churning out scholars from all walks of life. No, these institutions were more like finishing schools for the elite, ensuring that the sons of the wealthy remained in their cushy seats of power. If you were born into a family with the right pedigree, congratulations, you had a shot at becoming a scribe. But if your family tree was more shrub than oak, then tough luck, my friend. This system was less about creating a literate populace and more about perpetuating the status quo. In a world where information was power, literacy was the golden ticket to economic and social control. Only a select few could read and write, and they were the ones who got to play with the levers of power. Imagine a room of VIPs, all wielding styluses like golden scepters, while the rest of society watched from the sidelines. And why was literacy so coveted? Because the Sumerians had built an economy as complex as a Game of Thrones plotline. Managing the sprawling agricultural networks and bustling trade routes required a level of record-keeping that would make an Excel spreadsheet blush. In this context, scribes were the gatekeepers of knowledge, the ones who could tally the grain stores and calculate the king's taxes with the precision of a seasoned accountant. They were essential cogs in the bureaucratic machine, ensuring that the wheels of commerce kept turning smoothly. Now, let's take a moment to dispel a particularly persistent myth, that Sumerian society was a utopia of equality and enlightenment. Sure, they were pioneers in education, but they weren't exactly running a charity. The Sumerians understood that knowledge was a tool, and like any good craftsman, they wielded it to their advantage. Education was a means to an end, a way to reinforce social hierarchies and maintain economic control. But let's not throw the cuneiform tablets out with the bathwater just yet. There's a certain allure to the idea of ancient scribes, toiling away in the temple schools, carving out a legacy that would echo through the ages. They were the original data scientists, the ones who laid the groundwork for written communication and record-keeping. And while the system they operated within was far from perfect, it was a stepping stone in the evolution of education. Yet, let's not romanticize it too much. The reality was that for most Sumerians, education was as inaccessible as a secret menu at a five-star restaurant. Literacy was a privilege, one that came with strings attached, a reminder that even in the cradle of civilization, the more things change, the more they stay the same. For those who did manage to climb the scribal ladder, the rewards were tangible. Scribal positions were highly respected, and the economic security they offered was a rare commodity in a world where survival often hinged on the whims of nature and the caprices of the gods. Scribes could find themselves in positions of influence, rubbing shoulders with the upper echelons of society and enjoying perks that most could only dream of. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. The life of a scribe was demanding, and the pressure to perform was immense. Mistakes could be costly, not just for the individual, but for the entire community. In a society where a misplaced decimal could mean the difference between feast and famine, accuracy was paramount. Scribes were the stewards of Sumerian prosperity, and their work was scrutinized with the kind of intensity usually reserved for reality TV finales. Despite the high stakes, there was a certain prestige in being a scribe, a sense of accomplishment that came from mastering the intricacies of cuneiform and becoming a custodian of Sumerian history. They were the chroniclers of their time, ensuring that the triumphs and tribulations of their civilization were etched into the annals of history. So, as we continue to peel back the layers of Sumerian society, it's clear that education was more than just a pursuit of knowledge. It was a tool for shaping society, a means of controlling the narrative and preserving the power structures that defined the ancient world. And while the image of the Sumerian scribe may be cloaked in romance, the reality was a complex web of ambition, control, and survival. A reminder that the pursuit of knowledge has always been a double-edged sword. Stay with us as we delve further into this ancient tapestry, unraveling the threads of history, one clay tablet at a time. And so we find ourselves at the end of the Sumerian classroom journey, standing on the shoulders of those ancient scribes who unwittingly carved the path for future civilizations. So, what did the Sumerians really bequeath to the world aside from a penchant for clay? Well, for starters, they gave us the gift of literacy, a skill that transformed societies from Mesopotamia to the far reaches of the globe. It's no exaggeration to say that without the Sumerians, we might still be grunting our way through history instead of debating it on Twitter. Fast forward to Babylon, where Hammurabi was laying down his famous code around 1754 BCE. The Babylonians took the Sumerian model and ran with it, refining the art of record-keeping and further embedding literacy into the fabric of society. The Code of Hammurabi, inscribed on a massive stone stele, was a direct descendant of those Sumerian clay tablets. The Babylonians understood that laws needed to be set in stone, literally and figuratively, to maintain order in their expanding empire. Meanwhile, the Assyrians were sharpening their quills, or rather styluses, and creating vast libraries like the grand collection curated by King Ashurbanipal in the 7th century BCE. And let's not forget the Egyptians, who took a leaf out of the Sumerian book and ran their own schools for scribes, although their styluses were more likely to be reed pens dipped in ink. The influence of Sumerian education spread like wildfire through the ancient world, from the Hittites to the Persians, and eventually to the Greeks and Romans. The Greeks, with their love of philosophy, took the concept of learning beyond mere bureaucracy, while the Romans institutionalized education, creating a formal system that would set the stage for modern Western education. But even as these civilizations evolved, the echoes of the Sumerian ejubays remained. The emphasis on literacy, record-keeping, and centralized education became the hallmark of any civilization worth its salt. Now, let's pivot to the myths of a glorious past. Nostalgia, a dangerous drug that makes us believe the grass was somehow greener in the Fertile Crescent. The romantic notion of Sumer as a utopia of wisdom and enlightenment needs a reality check. Yes, they were pioneers, but let's remember that education was a privilege reserved for the elite. The ejubays were hardly open enrollment institutions, and the curriculum was more about serving the temple's interests than fostering independent thought. And while we're debunking myths, let's not ignore the societal pressures that came with being a scribe. The romantic image of a scribe as a revered intellectual hides the harsh reality of long hours, high stakes, and little room for error. Mistakes weren't just frowned upon, they could cost you your career. The Sumerians understood the power of the written word, but they also understood its peril, a double-edged stylus, if you will. Yet, for all the shortcomings, the Sumerians laid a critical foundation. They demonstrated that knowledge could be both a tool and a weapon. In a world where ignorance was bliss, they chose the harder path of education. And in doing so, they set a precedent that is echoed through the ages, that learning is a path to power, but also a responsibility. As we glance back at the Sumerian legacy, it's clear that some educational challenges remain uncannily familiar. The gap between the educated elite and the masses is a tale as old as time. The pressure to succeed, the societal expectations, the use of education as a means of control. Sound familiar? It seems that the more things change, the more they stay the same. The Sumerians remind us that education is not just about acquiring knowledge, but about understanding its power and the responsibility that comes with it. It's a lesson as relevant today as it was 4,000 years ago. So next time you text on your smartphone or scroll through a digital library, take a moment to thank the Sumerians. They might not have had Wi-Fi, but they set the stage for the connected world we live in today. In closing, let's leave the dusty corridors of the Ejubars behind, but not the lessons they taught us. The Sumerians, in their quest to manage an empire, unwittingly laid the groundwork for a world where knowledge is both a tool of empowerment and a means of control. It's a dual legacy, one that challenges us to use education wisely, to question the structures that limit access, and to strive for a world where learning is a right, not a privilege. And on that note, as your virtual tour guide through ancient Sumer, I bid you farewell. Until next time, stay curious, question everything, and remember, the past is never just history, it's a mirror reflecting our own times. The sun isn't even thinking about rising yet, and you're already wide awake. Welcome to the life of a 16th century Mughal courtier, where your day kicks off before dawn. Forget about hitting the snooze button, it's all about that early bird grind here. You roll out of bed, and the first order of business is to get squeaky clean. We're not talking about a quick rinse either. This is a full-on, ritualistic scrub down that would put any modern spa to shame. Soap? Ha! That's for amateurs. You're using a mixture of fine pastes and oils, maybe some sandalwood to give you that royal aroma. You see, the Mughal court is all about appearances, and smelling like yesterday's curry just won't cut it. As you wash away the night, you're not just getting clean. You're preparing yourself to project an air of sophistication and power. After all, when you're part of the machinery that keeps the Mughal Empire chugging along, looking the part is half the battle. Now, let's talk grooming. Your beard isn't just any beard, it's a statement. Think of it as the 16th century equivalent of flashing the latest tech gadget. You're wielding a fine-toothed comb and aromatic oils, making sure every hair is in its rightful place. Facial hair isn't just about fashion, it's a symbol of your status. In this world, a well-groomed beard can speak volumes about your standing in the societal hierarchy. On to the pièce de résistance, the wardrobe. You step into layers of silk and brocade that could clothe a small village. These aren't just any rags. Your garments are woven from the finest materials the empire can offer. Silk, imported from China, and brocade, with its intricate patterns, are your daily armor. And let's not forget the jewels. A shiny turban pin here, a glimmering sash there, each piece carefully selected to signal your wealth and influence. Now, here's a fact that might make your modern wallet wince. The cost of your outfit could rival a year's worth of someone's salary. We're talking about a tapestry of gold and silver threads that would make a modern-day fashionista drool. But hey, when you're rubbing shoulders with the likes of Emperor Akbar or Jahangir, you can't exactly show up in last season's threads, can you? But why all this fuss? Why the need for such extravagance? Well, in the Mughal court, looking the part is crucial. The empire is a sprawling beast, stretching across what is today India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. The Mughal economy is a powerhouse, driven by agriculture, trade, and a complex system of taxation. You're not just a courtier, you're part of the intricate web of politics and economy that keeps this empire ticking. Your appearance is a reflection of the empire's prosperity, a silent yet powerful statement of its opulence and stability. There's a myth out there, a romantic notion that the Mughal court was all about decadence and leisure. Don't be fooled. Sure, there's wealth aplenty, but beneath the surface it's a well-oiled machine of political maneuvering and economic strategizing. Every robe, every jewel is carefully calculated to send a message. You're here to play the game. And in this high-stakes world, clothes really do make the man. As you prepare to head to court, you can't help but ponder the irony. Amidst the silks and splendor, there's a whole other world out there. Peasants toiling in fields, artisans crafting the very fabrics you wear. Their lives are a far cry from the luxury you're about to step into, and yet they're the backbone of this grand empire. It's a stark reminder that while you bask in the glow of power and privilege, the wheels of the Mughal economy are greased by the sweat of countless unseen hands. With a final glance in the polished metal mirror, you step out, ready to face the day. The court awaits, a hive of activity where decisions are made, alliances are forged, and the fate of the empire is debated. You may be just one cog in this vast machine, but every move you make can ripple across the empire. So, you adjust your turban, take a deep breath, and stride towards the heart of the Mughal world, where your day is just beginning. As you step into the Mughal court, you're entering a world that's as dazzling as it is cutthroat. Think of it as the original Game of Thrones, minus the dragons, but with just as much backstabbing. The aroma of incense mingles with the scent of political ambition as you make your entrance, wrapping you in an intoxicating mix of allure and danger. Now, the Mughal court isn't just a place, it's a spectacle. Picture a sprawling hall, more opulent than a modern-day billionaire's penthouse. The ceiling looms above you, lavishly painted with celestial motifs, while beneath your feet, intricately woven Persian carpets cushion your every step. But don't let the beauty fool you. This is a stage where every actor knows their lines, and missing a cue could cost you more than just a role. You're here to navigate the labyrinth of power dynamics, where allegiances are as fleeting as a summer thunderstorm. Your first task? Diplomatic maneuvering, a skill as essential as breathing. In the Mughal court, alliance is a currency, as valuable as the gold coins jingling in your purse. It's a delicate dance, part art, part science, and entirely necessary if you want to stay on the emperor's good side. Speaking of the emperor, today it's Akbar you're hoping to impress. The man is a living legend, ruling from 1556 to 1605, and his court is a melting pot of cultures, religions, and ideas. But don't let the enlightened reputation fool you. Akbar is as shrewd as they come, always 3 steps ahead, and one misstep in front of him could send you tumbling into obscurity faster than you can say Jahangir. Gift-giving, a cornerstone of courtly culture. Forget your run-of-the-mill birthday presents, this is high-stakes gifting. We're talking elephants adorned with jeweled saddles, or perhaps a fine Persian carpet that took a year to weave. A gift isn't just a token, it's a statement, a strategic move in the chess game of court politics. Want to curry favour? Better make sure your offering is as thoughtful as it is extravagant. After all, the emperor's favour is as fickle as the monsoon winds. And let's not forget the comical lengths some courtiers will go to win that favour. Picture this. A rival courtier, feverishly trying to one-up your lavish offering, presents a rare albino peacock only for the bird to escape in the middle of the presentation. Cue the chaos as courtiers scramble to capture the rogue avian, a situation as humorous as it is mortifying. Moral of the story? Sometimes, even the best laid plans can go hilariously awry. But beneath the layers of silk and splendour, the court is a hotbed of intrigue. Power isn't just handed over, it's wrestled, bartered, and sometimes stolen in the dead of night. Consider the infamous case of Bayram Khan, Akbar's regent. Initially, he was the power behind the throne, guiding the young emperor with a firm hand. But in a twist worthy of any soap opera, Akbar decided to flex his own muscle, leading to Bayram's fall from grace. It's a vivid reminder that in this world, loyalty is a double-edged sword. And then there's the matter of succession. The drama. The Mughal court is full of whispers and speculation, each prince vying for a slice of the imperial pie. Take Jahangir, Akbar's son, for instance. While his father was an empire builder, Jahangir was more of a connoisseur of the finer things, wine, art, and, more wine. His ambitions were clouded not by doubt, but by a haze of indulgence. Still, never underestimate a prince with a penchant for power. History has shown us that ambition can sober anyone up pretty quick. In this high-stakes world, the unofficial motto is simple. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. But here's the kicker. Sometimes, they're one and the same. A trusted ally today could be a formidable foe tomorrow, and vice versa. It's a revolving door of allegiances, with each courtier angling for a better seat at the table. And speaking of tables, let's not forget the sumptuous feasts that are part and parcel of court life. These aren't just meals, they're performances, each dish a testament to the empire's wealth and culinary prowess. Imagine platters piled high with biryani, each grain of rice a tiny, flavorful masterpiece. The emperor's table is a riot of colors and aromas, a sensory overload that could make any modern-day food festival look like a meager picnic. Yet, beneath the opulent veneer lies the stark reality. The Mughal court is a microcosm of the empire itself, a place where wealth is concentrated, but also a reminder of the vast inequalities that underpin this grandeur. While you savor the delicacies, it's impossible to forget the farmers and laborers toiling to produce the abundance laid before you. Their hard work might not be visible in the courtly narrative, but it's the unspoken backbone of this lavish lifestyle. As you navigate this intricate world, it's clear that being a courtier is a relentless balancing act. You're constantly juggling personal ambitions with the needs of the empire, all while ensuring you don't trip over your own brocade-clad feet. Every conversation, every gesture is laden with nuances, each one potentially swaying the delicate balance of power. So, as you take your place among the tapestry of personalities that make up the Mughal court, remember, this isn't just a day at the office, it's a high-stakes game where every move counts and only the shrewdest survive. Trust is a rare commodity, and appearances can be deceiving. But with a bit of wit, a dash of charm, and a keen eye for opportunity, you might just emerge unscathed, or even better, with a few more jewels in your turban. The sun may set on the Mughal horizon, but the game never truly ends. As the sun dips below the horizon, painting the Mughal sky in shades of crimson and gold, the court's activities don't just grind to a halt. Oh no, the evening is when the real magic happens. This is when the Mughal court transforms into a hub of cultural and intellectual pursuits, a veritable Renaissance fair minus the turkey legs and faux medieval accents. Tonight, you're not just a cog in the imperial machine, you're a patron of the arts, a connoisseur of beauty, and, perhaps most strategically, a sharp-eyed player in the game of imperial patronage. Picture the Red Fort, not just as a fortress of military might, but as a canvas of creativity. Commissioned by Shah Jahan in 1638, its construction stretched over a decade, costing nearly 10 million rupees, a sum that would probably make today's billionaires blink twice. This is no mere pile of bricks. It's a statement in red sandstone and white marble, a lavish declaration of Mughal sophistication and power. You wander its halls, feeling the weight of history in every intricately carved pillar and every shimmering surface. But don't let the grandeur fool you into thinking it was all about the love of art. Sure, the court's patronage of the arts was partly genuine appreciation, but let's not kid ourselves. There was a hefty dose of strategic self-promotion in the mix. You see, by commissioning architectural marvels and hosting cultural gatherings, the Mughal emperors weren't just indulging in aesthetic pleasures. They were crafting a legacy, a way to etch their names in the annals of history with a flourish of artistic brilliance. Take the case of the Taj Mahal, another of Shah Jahan's pet projects, often hailed as the ultimate symbol of love. While it's easy to get swept away in the romanticism of it all, a monument built for his beloved Mumtaz Mahal. The reality is a tad more complex. This is less about love letters cast in stone and more about solidifying authority through architectural prowess. The Taj Mahal, completed in 1653, wasn't just a tomb. It was a testament to the empire's wealth, a tangible symbol of Shah Jahan's unshakable power. And speaking of power, let's not forget the artists and artisans themselves. Far from being mere anonymous craftsmen, they were often central figures in this cultural tapestry. Take Ustad Ahmad Lahori, one of the architects behind the Taj Mahal. His name might not be as famous as the monument he helped create, but without his genius, Shah Jahan's vision would have remained a mere dream. Yet, for all their talent, these artists often danced on the knife's edge of patronage, their fortunes tied to the whims of the emperor and his court. Let's zoom in on the Mughal miniatures, a genre that flourished under court patronage. These weren't just pretty pictures to hang on the wall, each miniature was a complex narrative captured in vibrant hues. Artists like Basawan and Daswant weren't just painters, they were storytellers, chronicling the epic tales of the empire in minute detail. Their works, often commissioned by emperors like Akbar and Jahangir, were as much about propaganda as they were about art. Every brushstroke was a subtle nod to the emperor's grandeur, a way of immortalizing his reign in rich, vivid colors. But here's the kicker. While the court indulged in these artistic pursuits, let's not forget the imperial ambitions lurking beneath the surface. Art and architecture were as much tools of statecraft as they were expressions of creativity. The Mughal emperors, shrewder than a fox in a henhouse, understood that a grand palace or an elaborate painting could wield power as effectively as any army. It was all about crafting an image, a narrative that projected strength, stability, and divine right to rule. And you, dear Courtier, play a pivotal role in this grand performance. Your support of these projects isn't just about personal taste. It's about aligning yourself with the Emperor's vision, reinforcing your own standing in this glittering hall of mirrors. Patronage is your ticket to influence, a way to ensure that your name, too, is etched into the Empire's legacy, even if it's in the fine print. Yet, for all its splendor, the Mughal court is also a place of stark contrasts. While you revel in the beauty of a newly unveiled painting or the unveiling of a grand architectural wonder, it's impossible to ignore the Empire's broader realities. Beneath the polished surface lies a society grappling with the pressures of expansion, the strains of governance, and the complexities of a diverse populace. Economic realities often cast long shadows over these cultural pursuits. The Empire's wealth, though vast, was not infinite. The cost of maintaining such opulence was borne on the backs of farmers, traders, and labourers. The Mughal economy, while robust, was a delicate balance of trade revenues, agricultural output, and the ever-present grind of taxation. Every grand project, every artistic endeavour was a strain on this intricate web of resources. So, as you take in the sights and sounds of this cultural renaissance, remember that it's not just about the beauty on display. It's about ambition, imperial ambition, personal ambition, and the ambitions of countless artists striving to leave their mark. And as you navigate this world, your role is clear. You're not just a passive observer, you're an active participant in the Empire's grand narrative, a player in a complex game where art and power intertwine inextricably. As the evening winds down and the court begins to disperse, you can't help but reflect on the day's events. The Mughal court, for all its grandeur, is a place of contradictions, a world where beauty and ambition dance a delicate waltz, where the past and present collide in a kaleidoscope of colour and intrigue. And as you retire for the night, you know that tomorrow brings another day of opportunity, another chance to weave yourself into the fabric of this magnificent empire. The game continues, and you wouldn't have it any other way. With the shadows lengthening and the court starting to disperse, you can't help but ponder the gears that keep this glittering Mughal machine running. You see, all that opulence needs a solid financial foundation, and it's not just conjured out of thin air. The Empire's wealth isn't some magic carpet ride. It's a colossal balancing act of revenue systems, land grants, and, brace yourself, tax collectors who could give today's IRS a run for their rupees. Welcome to the world of the Jagier system, a cornerstone of Mughal economics. Think of it as a real estate version of a medieval game show, where the prize isn't a car but a chunk of land. The emperor dispenses these land grants, or jagirs, to his loyal courtiers like you, and voila, you're suddenly the proud manager of vast tracts of farmland. But before you start dreaming of leisurely horseback rides through your new estate, let's unpack what this actually means. In theory, a jagir is a sweet deal. You collect revenue from the farmers working the land and, in return, provide military and administrative support to the empire. Simple, right? Well, in practice, it's about as straightforward as untangling a ball of yarn in a hurricane. First off, you're not the landowner. The land remains the emperor's. You're just the guy with the keys to the front gate. Now, managing these estates is where the real fun begins. If by fun you mean a labyrinth of bureaucracy and enough red tape to wrap the Taj Mahal, the revenue system is a Byzantine entity, with layers of officials, scribes, and tax collectors who all want a piece of the pie. Collecting taxes isn't just about tallying up bushels of wheat or sacks of rice. Oh no. It's an intricate dance involving everything from local market prices to the whims of monsoon rains. Take, for instance, the dastaks, official passes that were supposed to streamline tax collection but often ended up as tools for corruption. You'd have tax collectors using these passes to skim off the top, leaving you to explain the shortfall to an empire that doesn't suffer fools gladly. The frustration of dealing with these bureaucratic acrobatics would make even the most patient saint want to flip a table or two. And let's not forget the peasants, the real workforce behind all that agricultural bounty. While you're busy schmoozing at court, they're the ones toiling under the sun, ensuring the empire's granaries remain full. Yet, for all their hard work, they remain at the mercy of unpredictable weather and equally unpredictable tax demands. A bad harvest could mean disaster for them, and a tough conversation for you with the emperor's accountants. Oh, and speaking of unpredictable, consider the Farman system royal decrees that could, quite literally, change your life overnight. Imagine sipping your morning chai only to receive a Farman redirecting portions of your land's revenue to fund a new royal project or, worse, handing over your Jagier to another courtier who's currying favour with a particularly lavish gift. It's like the economic equivalent of musical chairs, where the music sometimes stops when you least expect it. But why all this elaborate juggling of revenue and land management? It's a reflection of the empire's broader strategy, an attempt to balance central authority with local governance. The Jagier system wasn't just about keeping courtiers like you happy, it was about ensuring loyalty and control across a sprawling empire that stretched from Kabul to Bengal. The emperor needed eyes and ears everywhere, and Jagiers were his way of embedding his trusted allies into the very fabric of provincial life. Now, let's tackle a myth that's as persistent as it is appealing, the notion that the Mughal court's extravagance was merely a glamorous facade, hiding an economic house of cards. Sure, the grandeur is real, but it's underpinned by a remarkably sophisticated economic system. The Mughal Empire was like a well-oiled machine, with its revenue systems and land grants playing crucial roles in its durability and success. Still, there's no denying the absurdities that come with managing such a vast enterprise. Picture this. A tax collector arrives at your Jagier, a ledger in one hand and a bribe in the other, his expression a mix of opportunism and desperation. You exchange pleasantries, all the while navigating a conversation as fraught with tension as a sword dance. It's a delicate balance. Play your cards right, and the Jagier can be a source of wealth and influence. Slip up, and you're facing an imperial audit that could leave you reeling. The real skill lies in mastering this chaotic system, turning its complexities to your advantage. It's not just about collecting taxes or managing land, it's about reading the political winds, knowing when to plant your flag and when to sail with the breeze. Each decision, each alliance, is a step on a tightrope stretched over a chasm of uncertainty. And speaking of uncertainty, let's not forget the ever-present spectre of imperial expansion. The Mughal appetite for conquest wasn't just about adding more jewels to the emperor's crown. Each newly conquered territory brought with it fresh revenue streams, but also new challenges in administration and integration. It's a constant balancing act, a testament to the empire's ambition and the intricate dance of power that keeps it afloat. As you navigate these waters, it's clear that your role as a courtier extends far beyond the court itself. You're part economist, part politician, and part diplomat, threading the needle between personal ambition and imperial duty. It's a high-stakes game, where fortunes can change as quickly as the emperor's favour. So, as you retire for the night, you reflect on the complexities of this world, a tapestry woven from threads of power, wealth, and relentless ambition. The Mughal court may be a place of grandeur and spectacle, but beneath its gilded surface lies a world of intricate machinery, each cog turning in perfect, if precarious, harmony. And with that, you prepare for another day in this dazzling, demanding empire, knowing that here the game never truly ends. As you drift off, pondering the swirling complexities of the Mughal court, it's time to pull back the curtain on the empire's grand legacy. The Mughals left an indelible mark on history, but it's not all peacocks and palaces. Sure, they dazzled with their architectural wonders and vibrant court life, but beneath the glittering facade lay a web of power plays and economic strategies worthy of a modern-day thriller. Let's start with the obvious, the Taj Mahal. It's the poster child for Mughal extravagance, a monument that's as much about love as it is about flexing imperial muscle. Shah Jahan wanted the world to gasp, and gasp it did. Constructed at an eye-watering cost of about 32 million rupees, it wasn't just a mausoleum, it was a megaphone, broadcasting Mughal power to anyone with eyes to see. But here's the kicker. While the emperors were busy immortalizing themselves in marble and stone, the empire's engine was powered by a vast and intricate economic machine. Picture trade routes that crisscrossed the subcontinent, connecting the bustling markets of Delhi, Agra and Lahore with the distant lands of Persia, the Ottoman Empire, and beyond. The Mughals were masterful traders, dealing in everything from precious gems to the finest silks. Their economy was the envy of the world, a formidable combo of agriculture, trade, and innovation. Now, rewind a bit and consider the Akbari era, when the empire was at its zenith. Akbar wasn't just some figurehead lounging on a cushioned throne. He was a savvy strategist who knew that an empire is only as strong as its weakest link. Under his rule, the Mughal Empire expanded exponentially, stretching over 1.5 million square miles. But Akbar's real genius lay in his ability to knit this vast territory together with a deft blend of diplomacy, marriage alliances, and the occasional well-timed military campaign. Yet all that glitters isn't gold. The Mughal legacy is a tapestry woven with both opulence and oppression. For every glittering jewel in the emperor's crown, there were countless peasants labouring under the weight of heavy taxation. The empire's wealth was a double-edged sword. On one side, it fueled monumental projects and a thriving cultural renaissance. On the other, it was a burden carried by the masses whose lives were a far cry from the court's splendour. And let's not forget the court's own intrigues. The Mughal court was a perpetual chess game where one wrong move could cost you not just your job, but your head. The infamous fall of Bayram Khan is a classic tale of power lost and regained in the blink of an eye. It's a stark reminder that while the Mughals built empires, they also spun webs of intrigue that could ensnare even the most seasoned players. Fast forward to the twilight years of the Mughal Empire, and you'll find a once mighty force grappling with internal strife and external threats. By the time Aurangzeb rolled out his ambitious expansion plans in the late 17th century, the empire was a shadow of its former self. Aurangzeb's reign stretched the empire to its limits, both geographically and financially. At its peak, the Mughal coffers were bursting, but sustaining such vastness proved impossible. The empire's decline was as dramatic as its rise, a cautionary tale of ambition unchecked by pragmatism. So, what's the takeaway from this saga of splendour and strategy? The Mughal legacy is a testament to the complex dance between power and responsibility. Their story isn't just about the grandiose architecture or the luxurious court life. It's a narrative rich with lessons on the perils of unchecked ambition and the delicate balance of governance. In today's world, where political and cultural dynamics are as volatile as ever, the Mughals offer a mirror to our own times. Their empire was a microcosm of ambition, innovation, and the eternal quest for legacy. As you close the chapter on this journey through the Mughal court, remember that history isn't a dusty relic of the past. It's a living, breathing entity, teeming with insights that echo through the corridors of time. So, as the Mughal sun sets, leaving a trail of stories in its wake, you're left with a new lens through which to view not just the past, but the present. The game of power is timeless, and much like the courtiers of old, we're all players in its enduring dance. The legacy of the Mughal court is a reminder that while empires may crumble, the lessons they impart have the power to shape us long after their last stone has fallen. High above the sun-drenched plains of Olympia, the air crackled with the kind of raw excitement you'd find at a modern-day Super Bowl, minus the nachos and cheerleaders. Here, nestled amidst the olive groves and ancient temples, the Olympic Games were born in 776 BC. And no, they weren't the polished, commercial spectacle we know today. Think more along the lines of a testosterone-fueled festival meets a rough-and-tumble family reunion, complete with a hefty dose of ancient Greek bravado. Now, let's set the scene for this legendary athletic showdown. First off, the Olympics were about as exclusive as a high school clique. Women, not allowed, unless they fancied a date with the afterlife, as legend has it that any woman caught sneaking in was chucked off a cliff. So, safe to say, it was an all-male affair. Except for one tiny loophole, women could technically win the chariot races, but only if they owned the horses. So, while the men flexed their muscles, the women who had a penchant for horse breeding could enjoy the glory from afar. Athletes from all corners of the Greek world embarked on epic journeys spanning up to 40 days just to flex their muscles in this 5-day festival of brawn. Picture roads clogged with travellers, all trudging and trotting their way to Olympia, an ancient pilgrimage minus the spiritual enlightenment. And all this for a shot at glory that could make or break a career. But let's talk stakes, because they were higher than you'd think for what was supposedly a noble pursuit of sport. Forget the romantic notion of the amateur athlete competing for sheer love of the game. The Greeks were practical folks. Winning wasn't just about wreaths of olive leaves. It was a ticket to fame, fortune, and a lifetime supply of free dinners. Victors returned home like rock stars, often receiving hefty pensions or even tax exemptions. Real perks for an athlete's bank account. So, how did this ancient sporting bonanza come into being? Well, back in the day, Olympia was a sleepy little town until some enterprising Greeks decided it was the perfect place to throw a mega sporting event. It didn't hurt that it was also a religious hub dedicated to Zeus, king of the gods. The first recorded Olympics in 776 BC featured a single event, a 192-meter sprint known as the Stadion race. It's like watching an entire season of the Olympics unfold in just 20 seconds. But hey, you have to start somewhere. The real kicker? These athletes weren't exactly the idealistic amateurs we like to imagine. They were more like ancient mercenaries of sport, often backed by wealthy patrons or city-states eager to bask in the reflected glory of an Olympic champion. Forget about training in secret. These guys had entire entourages, personal trainers, and strict diets, a far cry from the humble beginnings of Couch to 5K. And if you think modern sports endorsements are a big deal, think again. Economic incentives in ancient Greece were no joke. Winning could transform an athlete's life overnight. Some victors even received sculptures in their honor, ensuring their abs were immortalized in marble for generations to gawk at. In essence, the ancient Olympics were as much about politics and economics as they were about athletic prowess. City-states invested heavily in their athletes, seeing them as ambassadors of their power and prestige. It was a strategic play on the geopolitical chessboard of the time. A win wasn't just personal, it was a triumph for the athlete's entire polis. So, next time someone waxes poetic about the pure, untainted spirit of the ancient Olympian, feel free to chuckle. The reality was much grittier, driven by ambition, rivalry, and the practical allure of cold, hard rewards. As the games evolved, they added more events, from wrestling and boxing to chariot racing, each one more brutal than the last. But that's a tale for another day. For now, let's revel in the glorious, albeit messy, birth of what we now call the Olympic Games. Now, let's peel back the layers of this ancient sporting onion and dive straight into the sweaty, gritty world of athletic training in ancient Greece. If you thought modern athletes had it tough, think again. Forget about your local gym's air conditioning or fancy protein shakes. These ancient jocks were all about the grind. Sure, they might not have had treadmills, but they did have dusty fields and a disciplinarian's approach to getting those gains. Picture this. An athlete's life revolved around a strict regimen that could make a drill sergeant blush. Training started at dawn, and often didn't wrap up until the sun dipped below the horizon. The Greeks believed in honing the body as much as the mind, subscribing to the idea of arete, or excellence, in all things. And as with any good obsession, it required total commitment. Diet was of paramount importance, and trust me, it was a far cry from today's carb-conscious menus. These guys bulked up on cheese, figs and bread, washed down with a splash of wine, because hydration is important, right? Meat was reserved for the pros, as it was believed to impart strength. But here's the kicker. Athletes also consumed copious amounts of olive oil, not just for cooking, mind you, but as a vital part of their skincare routine. They slathered it on like there was no tomorrow, believing it would keep their skin supple and muscles primed. It's like ancient Greece's answer to a high-end moisturizer, but with extra calories. Speaking of olive oil, let's not forget its dual role as both fuel and a prize. Victors were often awarded amphorae filled with this liquid gold, which was worth a small fortune at the time. Imagine winning a gold medal and a lifetime supply of high-grade olive oil to boot. It was the ultimate status symbol, proof that you were not only a beast on the track, but also a savvy investor in the kitchen. But let's not sugarcoat it. The training was brutal. Coaches, often former champions themselves, pushed their protégés to the limit, employing a no-nonsense approach that bordered on the sadistic. The ancient Greek version of a personal trainer would have made your modern-day fitness guru look like a life coach. There was a raw honesty to the competitions that stripped away any illusions of friendly rivalry. It was about survival of the fittest, and the stakes were higher than Zeus's throne. In the ring, the wrestling arena, or the stadium, political undertones simmered just below the surface. City-states saw these games as the perfect opportunity to showcase their prowess. When an athlete from, say, Athens or Sparta clinched victory, the entire polis celebrated. It was more than just personal glory, it was a trumpet blast of their city's might and influence. And while we're on the subject of city-states flexing their muscles, let's address the myth of the pures competition. Sure, the Olympics were supposed to be about brotherhood and sportsmanship, but who are we kidding? Politics were as thick in the air as the dust kicked up by the runners. These games were a stage for political maneuvering, alliances, and rivalries. It was less about the love of sport and more about the love of power and prestige. The athletes, often pawns in this grand game of chess, knew this all too well. Winning wasn't just about personal fame. It was a duty to their city, a way to elevate its status on the Greek stage. And in a world where the favour of the gods could shift with the wind, every victory was a chance to claim a bit of divine backing for your polis. So the next time someone waxes lyrical about the ancient Olympics' untainted spirit, you can confidently roll your eyes. The reality was a complex web of ambition, politics, and raw human drive. The Greeks knew that in the arena, as in life, it was all about who could outlast, outwit, and outmaneuver the rest. And for those who managed to rise above the fray, the rewards were sweet indeed, both in this life and the annals of history. As we continue our journey through the ancient Greek sporting world, remember this. Behind every laurel wreath and every drop of olive oil, there was a story of struggle, ambition, and the relentless pursuit of excellence. Stay tuned, because the plot is only thickening. And speaking of the relentless pursuit of excellence, let's pivot from the sweaty, sun-baked athletic fields to the pulsating heart of the Olympic Games, the cultural festivities. Picture this: the opening ceremonies, a heady blend of grandeur and chaos, set the tone for a festival that was part athletic showdown, part religious spectacle, and part ancient Greek Coachella. If you thought today's Olympic opening ceremonies were over the top, with their fireworks and choreographed displays, brace yourself. The Greeks were the original masters of showmanship, minus the LED screens and pyrotechnics. The festivities kicked off with a procession that snaked its way through the sacred grounds of Olympia, a sight to behold with athletes, priests, and officials all decked out in their finest. The air was thick with the scent of incense, and the chatter of thousands of spectators who had come from all over the Greek world, sort of like an ancient version of Where's Waldo, but with more togas and less subtlety. This wasn't just a spectacle, it was a carefully orchestrated display of power and piety. Every city-state wanted to make its mark, to be seen, to be remembered. Next, let's turn to the poets and artists. Ah yes, the unsung heroes who added a touch of culture to the proceedings. While we might not find Homer reciting the Iliad in the stands, the Olympic Games were fertile ground for artists and poets to make their mark. Winning athletes could expect to be immortalized in verse, their feats captured by wordsmiths eager to spin tales of glory. And let's face it, who wouldn't want their exploits sung by the greatest poets of the day? It was an ancient equivalent of going viral sans the internet, but with just as much hype. But wait, there's more. The games were also a carnival of sorts, complete with vendors hawking their wares. Picture stalls lined with food, trinkets and souvenirs. The original merch tables, if you will. Everything from exotic spices to locally crafted pottery was up for grabs, transforming the sacred site into a bustling marketplace. It was a feast for the senses, a commercial bonanza that left no drachma unspent. Now, let's talk numbers. Hosting the Olympic Games wasn't cheap. In fact, it was a financial headache that could rival any modern Olympic budget. City-states were known to shell out considerable sums to ensure their athletes were well prepared and their delegations properly represented. We're talking about costs that could put a dent in the Polish treasury, all in the name of prestige and honour. But hey, who said statecraft was ever frugal? And let's not underestimate the political manoeuvring behind these games. The Olympics were as much about diplomacy as they were about discus throws. City-states jockeyed for influence, forming alliances and securing favours in the shadow of the temples. It was a political dance, as intricate as any athletic event, where a handshake or a nod could seal a pact more enduring than the laurel wreaths awarded to the victors. But here's the kicker. While states plotted, the real spectacle unfolded on the track and field. The athletes were the stars of the show, their every move watched by thousands. A win on this grand stage meant more than just personal glory. It was a diplomatic victory, a chance to elevate one's city-state in the ever-competitive arena of Greek politics. Winning the Olympics was akin to winning the ancient world's version of a geopolitical Grammy. And what about the spectators? Packed into the stands, they were a cross-section of Greek society, from the wealthy elite to the common folk. The games offered a rare opportunity for social mixing, a chance for everyone to see and be seen. It was a melting pot of humanity, united by the shared thrill of the competition and the spectacle of the ceremonies. As the days of the festival unfolded, the atmosphere grew more electric, charged with anticipation and the heady mix of sweat, incense, and olive oil. It was a time of revelry and celebration, where the lines between competition and camaraderie blurred. Amidst the chaos, friendships were forged, rivalries kindled, and legends born. And let's not forget the role of the gods in all this. The games were, after all, a religious festival dedicated to Zeus. Sacrifices were made, prayers offered, and omens read to ensure divine favour. It was a reminder that despite the political machinations and economic interests, the gods still held sway over mortal affairs. So, as we peel back the layers of the ancient Olympics, it's clear that this was more than just a sporting event. It was a cultural phenomenon, an economic engine, and a political stage all rolled into one. The games were a reflection of the Greek world in microcosm, a testament to its complexities and contradictions. As we wrap up this chapter of our exploration, keep in mind that the story of the ancient Olympics is far from over. There's still much more to uncover, from the brutal realities of the competitions to the enduring legacy of these ancient rituals. So stay tuned, because the next stage of our journey promises to be just as thrilling as the last. As the dust settled from the opening ceremonies, it was time to dive headfirst into the main event, the sports themselves. An ancient showcase of human endurance, skill, and, let's be honest, a fair share of brutality. Welcome to the gritty core of the ancient Olympics, where the competition was as fierce as a pack of Spartans on a bad day, and the stakes made today's gold medals look like participation trophies. First up, let's talk chariot racing. Imagine the thrill of NASCAR, the danger of bullfighting, and the thrill of a medieval joust all rolled into one. Held in a massive hippodrome, these races were the ultimate test of speed and nerve, with teams tearing around the track in a blur of horses, wheels, and occasionally airborne debris. Each race was a spectacle of controlled chaos, where a single misstep could send a charioteer and his team crashing into the dust. The races weren't just about who crossed the finish line first, they were a display of wealth and power. After all, owning a stable of thoroughbred horses was the ancient equivalent of parking a fleet of Ferraris in your driveway. And then there's pancration, the no-holds-barred sport that makes modern mixed martial arts look like a friendly game of tag. This deadly mix of boxing and wrestling was the ultimate test of an athlete's mettle. With few rules and even fewer safety nets, pancration was as brutal as it was popular. Fighters grappled, punched, and kicked their way to victory, often fighting until one competitor was rendered unconscious, or worse. Forget about weight classes or protective gear. Pancration was raw, primal, and downright ferocious. In fact, it was one of the few events that allowed such a level of violence, reflecting the Greek admiration for physical prowess. The only real rules? No biting and no eye gouging, because even ancient Greeks had their limits. The allure of these contests wasn't just the thrill of the fight, it was the promise of glory. Victors in these events didn't just win, they ascended to a near-mythical status. Picture coming home to a hero's welcome, parades in your honor, and poets immortalizing your feats in verse. Winning an event at the Olympics was akin to securing a lifetime VIP pass to the best tables in town, plus a statue in your likeness, because nothing says, "I've made it," quite like being immortalized in marble. But let's not get too starry-eyed. The idea of sportsmanship in these contests often took a back seat to survival and victory. Ancient Greek athletes were as strategic as they were strong, often employing cunning tactics that would raise eyebrows today. Bribery and political alliances were as much a part of the game as the events themselves. If you think modern sports scandals are shocking, consider this. Athletes of the time were known to accept bribes to throw matches, and city-states weren't above offering incentives to sway outcomes. It was less about the love of the game and more about securing bragging rights and political leverage. Speaking of rewards, let's delve into the spoils of victory. While today's athletes might dream of endorsements and sponsorship deals, ancient Olympians were rewarded in more immediate, tangible ways. Victors were often showered with gifts and accolades upon returning home. Cities offered free meals for life, tax exemptions, and even cash prizes. In Athens, for instance, a victorious athlete could pocket a cool 500 drachmas, enough to make a significant dent in the local real estate market. And let's not forget the lifetime of free dinners, because nothing says you've made it like never having to cook again. So, why did these athletes put themselves through such grueling contests? The answer lies in the societal and political milieu of the time. In a world where honour and reputation were everything, the Olympics were a stage to prove oneself, not just as an athlete, but as a citizen of a powerful polis. It was a platform to demonstrate individual excellence and, by extension, the superiority of one's city-state. These games were more than just athletic contests. They were a microcosm of Greek society, where personal and collective identities were forged and celebrated. The ancient Olympics, then, were a mix of honour, ambition, and raw human drive. They were a reflection of the complex interplay between personal glory and political machination, where the line between competition and survival was often blurred. As we continue to unravel this tapestry of ancient sportsmanship, remember that behind every laurel wreath and every blood-stained arena lies a story of struggle, ambition, and the relentless pursuit of excellence. The plot thickens, and there's much more to uncover in this saga of ancient athletic prowess. Stay tuned, because the best, and perhaps the most brutal, is yet to come. As the dust settled and the echoes of triumph faded, the ancient Olympic Games left a legacy that would resonate through the ages. Long after the chariots had ceased their thunderous races and the echoes of the Pancratian brawls had died down, the impact of these games lingered, shaping the cultural and physical ideals of Western civilization. The ancient Greeks may not have invented the wheel, but they certainly knew how to turn athletic contests into an art form. Fast forward a couple of millennia, and it's clear that the spirit of these ancient games lives on in today's Olympic spectacles. Sure, we've traded in olive wreaths for gold medals and amphorae for endorsement deals, but the core of the competition remains remarkably similar. The modern Olympics are a testament to how the Greeks managed to institutionalize the notion of global athletic excellence. It's a little like how your grandma's secret recipe for cookies somehow lives on in every batch you bake. Though the ingredients might change, the essence remains. Yet, let's not romanticize the ancient games as a utopia of pure sportsmanship. The reality was that the Olympics were as much about political maneuvering as they were about athletic prowess. Each win was a diplomatic statement, a flex of muscle not just on the field but in the geopolitical arena. And while today's events might focus on unity and international friendship, ancient Greece was more about showing who could throw their weight and discus around the furthest. But why did these ancient games eventually peter out? The answer lies in a cocktail of economic woes, political shifts, and a little sprinkle of changing cultural tastes. By the time we hit the Roman era, the games had become a shadow of their former glory days. The Romans had their own ideas about entertainment, cue the gladiatorial combats and chariot races that would make any Greek cringe. The Olympics were eventually banned in 39-3 AD by Emperor Theodosius I, who decided that anything associated with pagan rituals was a no-go. Talk about a party pooper move. Economic factors also played a significant role in the decline. The sheer cost of hosting these games turned out to be a financial sinkhole. Imagine a city-state's budget more strained than a toga in a strong breeze. With resources stretched thin, investing in grandiose sporting events became less appealing when there were more pressing matters, like defending against the latest barbarian incursion or fixing the crumbling infrastructure. Despite their decline, the Olympic Games left an indelible mark on Western ideas of competition and excellence. The Greeks introduced the concept of agon, or struggle, which became the backbone of Western competitive spirit. This notion transcends sports, influencing everything from business to politics. The idea that excellence requires competition, and that greatness is achieved through struggle, owes a debt to those ancient athletes pounding the dusty tracks of Olympia. Fast forward to the revival of the modern Olympics in 1896, and you'll see how deeply the ancient games influenced Baron Pierre de Coubertin, the father of the modern Olympics. De Coubertin was captivated by the ideals of ancient Greek athletics, though he conveniently glossed over the less savoury aspects like the rampant bribery and occasional eye-gouging. A romantic, he envisioned a global event that would unite nations through sport. Little did he know he was also reviving an ancient tradition that had as much to do with politics as it did with athleticism. And, oh, how the spectacle has grown. The modern Olympics are a multi-billion-dollar extravaganza, complete with commercial endorsements, global broadcasting rights, and enough pageantry to make even the most lavish ancient Greek festival look like a humble village fete. The economic footprint of the modern games is staggering. For instance, the 2012 London Olympics cost a whopping $15 billion, a number that would have been unimaginable to an ancient Greek city-state still counting its olive amphorae. Yet, the essence of competition and the pursuit of excellence remain unchanged. Just like the Greeks, we celebrate our athletes as heroes, immortalizing their feats in the annals of history. Though today's athletes might not return home to statues in their honor, they do enjoy global fame and the occasional cereal box cover. 21st century perks that would make even the most celebrated ancient Olympian blush. In the end, the ancient Olympic Games were a complex tapestry of ambition, politics, and human drive. They were a reflection of the Greek world, its ideals and its flaws, encapsulated in a festival of athletic prowess. As we watch the modern games unfold, we are witnessing not just a continuation of this ancient tradition, but a global celebration of the enduring human spirit. It's a reminder that while the venues and the stakes may have changed, the fundamental desire to excel and compete remains as primal and powerful as ever. So, as you tune into the next Olympics, spare a thought for those pioneering athletes of ancient Greece. They might not have had the luxury of lycra or the comfort of cushioned running shoes, but they laid the groundwork for a tradition that continues to inspire and unite the world. And while today's games come with their own set of controversies and challenges, the legacy of the ancient Olympics endures, a testament to the timeless allure of the sporting spirit. You're standing at the crossroads of the Silk Road, where the air's thick with the scent of spices and the sound of haggling merchants. It's the 10th century, and you're a Persian poet navigating a world where words are currency and patrons are your lifeline. Your day starts early, not with an alarm clock, but with the call to prayer echoing through the streets of Nishapur or Baghdad. These cities are pulsating with life, the heartbeats of a vast empire stretching from the Arabian Sea to the edges of the Byzantine world. The socio-economic landscape you're immersed in is a swirling tapestry of trade routes, teeming with merchants peddling everything from silk to saffron. Picture this, a caravan stretching as far as the eye can see, loaded with goods worth fortunes. You, however, deal in a different kind of wealth poetry. But don't get too romantic about it. Your quill and ink aren't just for crafting odes to beauty. They're your ticket to survival, in a world where the arts are as much about patronage as they are about passion. The Abbasid Caliphate is at its peak, a beacon of cultural and intellectual prosperity. Yet, for you, it's less about lofty ideals and more about securing a patron who can keep the bread on your table and the ink in your well. Patronage is the name of the game, and it often feels like a game of chess, where the wrong move can leave you out in the cold, literally. Your patrons are the aristocrats and bureaucrats, men of power who appreciate a well-turned phrase as much as a well-fought battle. They fund your work, but in return, you better be ready to craft verses that sing their praises louder than 100 trumpets. Let's debunk a myth right here. Being a poet isn't just lounging around, sipping wine and writing sonnets. No, you're hustling, my friend. It's all about networking, and your survival depends on your ability to navigate these social waters as deftly as a merchant steering a ship through the Persian Gulf. You're attending lavish gatherings, where wine flows like the Tigris and the room buzzes with debate and wit. You need to catch the ear of a potential patron, impress them with your eloquence, and hope they're in a generous mood. If you're lucky, you'll leave with a promise of silver coins to fill your purse and verses to fill your pages. Speaking of silver, let's talk numbers. A decent poem might earn you around 10 silver dirhams, enough to keep you fed and housed for a month if you're thrifty. But don't count on a steady income. Your fortunes can rise and fall with a single verse. One day you're the toast of the town. The next, you're scraping together dirhams to afford paper. And paper isn't cheap. It's imported from China. And a single sheet could set you back a hefty sum, so you write small and conserve space like your life depends on it, because it does. The trade routes are your lifeline. a network that brings not just goods but also ideas and inspiration. You're as likely to find a Greek philosophical treatise as you are a bolt of Chinese silk, and both are equally valuable to a mind hungry for knowledge. You jot down ideas in the margins of manuscripts, absorbing everything from Indian mathematics to Persian astronomy. It's all fodder for your work, a melting pot of intellectual ferment that you distill into verse. But let's not sugarcoat it. The life of a poet is as precarious as a tightrope walker's. There's a romantic notion that poets are solitary dreamers, but the reality is much grittier. You're a social chameleon, adapting to the whims of your patrons and the ever-shifting tides of political power. One wrong word, one ill-timed satire, and you could find yourself out of favour, or worse, out of town. Political intrigue is as much a part of your life as metaphors and metre. You're always aware of the undercurrents, the whispers in the court, and the shifting alliances that could make or break your career. Yet, despite the uncertainties and the constant hustle, there's a magic to your life. You're part of a vibrant cultural renaissance, a period of unmatched creativity and intellectual flowering. Your words have the power to inspire, to provoke thought, and to stir the hearts of men. And that's why you do it. Because in a world of merchants and monarchs, of soldiers and slaves, your voice can carry across the ages. So here you are, a 10th century Persian poet, living at the intersection of commerce, culture, and cunning. It's not an easy life, but it's a rich one, full of stories yet to be told and verses yet to be written. And as you dip your quill into the ink, the world is yours to capture, one word at a time. As the sun dips below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the bustling streets, you, my friend, are just getting started. The day might have been filled with the clamour of markets and the strategic dance of patronage, but night-time is when the real magic happens for a 10th century Persian poet like you. This is your time to weave starlit words into verses, to transform the quietude into a symphony of thoughts. After all, inspiration isn't something that punches a time clock. Now, let's squash a myth right off the bat. The romanticized image of a poet lounging under the moonlight, quill in hand, effortlessly penning masterpieces? Yeah, not quite. Picture more of a late-night grind where your candle is your most loyal companion, flickering as you wrestle with words that refuse to behave. You've got a notebook, probably made of that pricey paper from Samarkand. Why Samarkand, you ask? Well, it's only the paper capital of the medieval world, producing sheets so fine they make your quill glide like a dream. But fair warning, each sheet could cost you as much as a labourer's daily wage, so you're literally writing on money. The tools of your trade are modest yet essential. Your quill, made from a reed or feather, is your sword in this nightly battle against the blank page. Ink? It's a concoction of soot and gum Arabic. Think of it as the artisanal craft brew of writing tools. And as you dip your quill into this inky elixir, you hope tonight's creation will be the one that earns you a patron's favour, or at least a few more dirhams to keep the pantry stocked. But why night-time, you wonder? Simple. The quietude of night frees you from the day's distractions. The world's asleep, allowing your mind to wander without interruption. It's a tradition deeply rooted in Persian culture, where the serenity of the night is seen as a time for introspection and creativity. The Persian night is your muse, its stillness a blank canvas upon which your imagination can paint. You might think that writing is a solitary act, but let's not kid ourselves. Even at night, you're not really alone. You've got the ghosts of poets past whispering in your ear. Rumi, Hafez, Ferdowsi. They're all part of your nocturnal posse, guiding your hand as you scribble your way into history. Sure, some might call them competitors, but in this game, they're your mentors, the giants on whose shoulders you stand. This brings us to the influence of Persian culture on your creative process. Persian poetry is a cocktail of mysticism, philosophy, and celebration of nature, mixed with a dash of political commentary. Because who doesn't love a good metaphorical swipe at the powers that be? You're not just writing for the here and now. You're crafting verses that echo with the wisdom of ages, drawing from Zoroastrian traditions and Islamic thought. It's a balancing act, walking the line between secular and sacred, and if you do it right, your words will resonate through the halls of power and the hearts of common folk alike. The societal backdrop, too, colours your work. The Abbasid Caliphate, with its cultural renaissance, provides a rich tapestry of themes to explore. You're living in a time when Baghdad's House of Wisdom is the intellectual hub of the world. Scholars are translating Greek texts into Arabic while astronomers are mapping the stars. It's a veritable golden age of learning, and you're soaking it all up, letting it infuse your poetry like saffron in a pot of rice. But let's not romanticize it too much. You're also acutely aware that every word you write could either catapult you to fame or send you packing. Critique the wrong person, and you might find yourself out of favor, or worse, out of a job. Your poetry, while a tool for personal expression, is also a tightrope walk of political savvy. And here's the kicker. Your creative process is as much about survival as it is about art. You have to be strategic about which themes to explore and which to leave untouched. Love, nature, and spirituality are fair game, but wade into political waters, and you better be prepared for the consequences. The right metaphor can make you a hero, while the wrong one can turn you into a pariah. As the night deepens, the rhythmic scratching of your quill is your only soundtrack. You're in a trance, each verse a brushstroke on the canvas of your mind. This is your ritual, a dance with words under the watchful eyes of the stars. And while the rest of the world slumbers, you're wide awake, carving your place in the annals of history, one line at a time. So, there you are, a night owl in the truest sense, perched on the precipice of creation. The world is quiet, your thoughts are loud, and as the moon bathes your chamber in silver light, you realize that the night, in all its solitude and silence, is yours to conquer. Tomorrow you'll face the hustle and bustle of the day once more, but for now, you write. And that's the real magic of being a 10th century Persian poet, finding your voice in the whispering shadows of the night. But as the ink dries on your latest verse, let's pivot to a reality check. Persian poetry wasn't all love letters to the moon and philosophical musings. Oh no, my friend, it was also a high-stakes game of verbal chess. You had to be as strategic as a Byzantine general and as subtle as a shadow in the caliph's court. The truth is, your quill was your sword, and every poem was a potential battlefield. Now, here's where we dive into the murky waters of censorship and political pressures. To keep those silver dirhams coming, you needed to stay on the good side of the powers that be. One wrong word, and you could find yourself on the wrong side of a dungeon door. The Abbasids, for all their cultural contributions, weren't exactly champions of free speech. They had a vested interest in maintaining their image, and poets like you were both their PR agents and potential liabilities. You see, poetry in the 10th century wasn't just about personal expression, it was a political tool. The right verse could carry favour, while the wrong one could land you in hot water faster than you can say sultanic displeasure. It's no wonder poets often cloaked their critiques in metaphor and allegory. Publicly denouncing a ruler was a fast track to exile, or worse. So, how did you navigate this minefield? Enter the art of the veiled criticism. Persian poets were masters at this craft, weaving intricate tapestries of language that could be interpreted in multiple ways. Was that couplet about a tyrannical king really about the caliph? Or was it merely a commentary on a mythological despot? Only you, and maybe a few trusted confidants, knew for sure. It's like playing a never-ending game of Who's That Poem Really About?, where the stakes are your livelihood and liberty. But let's talk numbers, because in this world, numbers matter. The price of a misstep wasn't just theoretical. A disgraced poet could find themselves stripped of patronage, their income cut off, and their name blackened like a scroll tossed into the fire. And given that a mere 10 dirhams could sustain you for a month, losing a patron was no small matter. You couldn't exactly moonlight as an Uber driver to make ends meet. Yet, for all the constraints, this was also a time of incredible creativity. The limitations themselves bred innovation. The very act of encoding your true thoughts into poetry became a form of intellectual gymnastic, a way to balance integrity with survival. And therein lies the romantic appeal. Imagine crafting a verse so beautifully subversive that it survives not just the sensor's ink, but the ravages of time. What about the myth of the poet as an isolated genius, toiling away in solitude? Let's smash that notion to bits. You weren't a lone wolf, you were more like a member of a pack. The literary salons of the time were buzzing with competition and camaraderie. These gatherings, often hosted by patrons or influential scholars, were fertile ground for exchanging ideas, debating philosophies, and showcasing your latest work. Think of them as the TED Talks of the 10th century, minus the PowerPoint presentations. Here, poets, philosophers, and scholars mingled, each trying to outdo the other with wit and wisdom. It was a gladiatorial arena of the mind, where the sharpness of your tongue determined your standing. You had to be as quick with your repartees as you were with your rhymes. And remember, impressing the right people in these gatherings could mean the difference between a full belly and a hollow one. But let's not kid ourselves, there was a dark side too. The patronage system was rife with favoritism in politics, and poets often found themselves at the mercy of their benefactors' whims. One day you were the darling of the court, the next you were persona non grata, depending on which way the political winds blew. It was enough to make anyone's head spin faster than a whirling dervish. In this cutthroat environment, what was the secret to maintaining your integrity? It was a high-wire act, my friend. You had to know when to speak out and when to bite your tongue. Your survival depended not just on your skill with words, but on your ability to read the room, a skill just as valuable today as it was a millennium ago. And let's not forget the ever-watchful eye of religious authorities. The caliphate was a theocracy after all, and stepping out of line with religious doctrine could land you in hot water. Theologians and clerics wielded significant influence, and they weren't shy about using it to enforce orthodoxy. Your poetry had to navigate these waters too, carefully treading the line between secular and sacred. One blasphemous metaphor, and you could find yourself facing charges of heresy. Yet, despite, or perhaps because of these constraints, Persian poetry thrived. It became a vehicle not just for personal expression, but for exploring the deepest questions of existence. This was an era when Sufi mystics were turning inward, seeking divine truth through poetry and prose. Your work wasn't just about pleasing patrons. It was also about connecting to the divine, transcending the earthly realm, even as you navigated its pitfalls. The pressure to conform while still finding your unique voice was immense. It was a constant push and pull, like trying to steer a ship against the tide. But the poets who succeeded, who managed to thread this needle, created works that have endured for centuries. Their words have crossed oceans and centuries, speaking to the universality of the human experience. So, as you sit there, quill in hand, facing the daunting blankness of the page, know this: you're not just a poet. You're a navigator, a diplomat, a philosopher, and a survivor. You're crafting not just verses, but a legacy. And in the end, isn't that what poetry is all about? Transcending the limits of your time to speak to the ages? As the candle flickers its last, casting shadows that dance on the walls, you realize that this struggle, this dance with words and power, is your own kind of immortality. The night may end, but your poetry lives on. And there you are, quill poised over parchment, your mind wrestling with the weight of words. But here's the thing, as you craft your verses, you're not just leaving ink on paper. You're shaping the cultural tapestry of your time and, believe it or not, the centuries to come. Persian poetry, my friend, is a force of nature, like a desert wind that carries tales far beyond the horizon. Let's dive into the ripples your words create. In the 10th century, Persian poets didn't just influence local aristocrats over cups of spiced wine. They were cultural ambassadors. This was a time when the Islamic world was as interconnected as a modern-day Twitter feed, albeit with more parchment and fewer hashtags. Your verses, imbued with the elegance of Persian metaphors, travelled along the same silk road that saw spices, silks, and ideas exchanged like currency. And just like that, Persian poetry became the lingua franca of the intellectual elite from Cairo to Cordoba. And what about those future generations? Well, your work laid the groundwork for a literary tradition that would influence not only the Islamic world but also reach out to India, Central Asia, and even into the heart of Europe. Fast forward a few centuries, and Persian poetry is still the talk of the town, inspiring everyone from Mughal emperors to Ottoman sultans. Take Rumi, for instance. By the 13th century, he's spinning mystical verses in Konya, using the Persian language to explore themes of unity and love. His verses resonate far beyond his own time, influencing not only Islamic mysticism, but also modern-day self-help sections in bookstores worldwide. You could say he was the original viral poet. His works translated into more languages than you've had hot dinners. And it all started with the groundwork laid by poets like you, whose words danced across the ages. Let's not forget the economics of all this poetic influence. Remember how we talked about poetry being more than just a creative outlet? It was a profession, a means of survival. Well, that profession had far-reaching economic impacts. The demand for Persian literature wasn't just about satisfying the whims of a cultured elite. It created job opportunities, from scribes to calligraphers and even paper merchants. It's the medieval version of a booming publishing industry. And speaking of paper, let's give a nod to the unsung heroes of this literary expansion, the translators. Without them, your Persian verses might have remained a local delight. These linguistic magicians took your words and spun them into Arabic, Turkish, and countless other tongues, ensuring your poetic legacy crossed borders and bridged cultures. It's like the world's first multilingual bestseller list, with your work at the top. Now, let's tackle a myth that's stubbornly persistent. The idea that Persian poetry was simply about flowery language and romantic ideals. Sure, the imagery was lush, but it was often a Trojan horse for deeper social criticisms and philosophical musings. Your poems weren't just pretty words strung together. They were a coded language that allowed you to critique society, challenge norms, and even question political authority, all while maintaining the facade of a mere entertainer. This subversive quality is perhaps why Persian poetry not only survived, but thrived in various political climates. It was adaptable, like a chameleon, able to reflect the values and concerns of different societies, while still retaining its core essence. And this adaptability made it a perfect vehicle for cultural exchange, allowing ideas to flow smoothly across the Islamic world and beyond, like water under a bridge. And here's a fun fact. Persian poetry even influenced Western literature. By the 18th and 19th centuries, European scholars were translating Persian classics, introducing Western audiences to the likes of Ferdowsi and Hafez. This cross-cultural exchange was a two-way street, enriching both Persian and Western literary traditions. Who would have thought that your midnight musings would one day inspire a romantic poet in some candlelit European study? But let's not get too carried away with the romance of it all. The reality was that not every poet got to bask in such international acclaim. Many toiled in relative obscurity, their works lost to time like sand slipping through fingers. The literary world was as much a meritocracy as it was a who-knows-who network. And sometimes, even the most brilliant verses couldn't save you from the brutal winds of fate or a particularly vindictive patron. Yet, despite the uncertainties, you and your fellow poets created something enduring. The legacy of Persian poetry is a testament to the power of words, a reminder that even in the most constrained circumstances, creativity finds a way to flourish. Your quill might have been a humble tool, but it was also a mighty sword, cutting through the noise of history to leave an indelible mark. So, as you pen your next stanza, remember this: you're part of a lineage that transcends time and place. Your words are a bridge between cultures, a dialogue that continues to this day. You're not just writing poetry, you're crafting a legacy that will be felt for generations. And as the first light of dawn peeks through your window, you realize that your work is far from over. There's a world out there, waiting for the next chapter of your story, and with your quill in hand, you're ready to write it. As the first light of dawn peeks through your window, you realize that your work is far from over. There's a world out there, waiting for the next chapter of your story, and with your quill in hand, you're ready to write it. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Before you start spinning new verses, let's reflect on what makes the legacy of 10th century Persian poets so enduring and, dare I say, timeless. It's not just about the beautiful language, although let's be real, those metaphors could melt even the coldest heart. No, it's about the themes that weave through the fabric of Persian poetry like gold threads in a silk tapestry. Themes of love, longing, and the existential musings of a soul searching for its place in the universe. These aren't just poetic tropes. They're universal questions that echo through the corridors of time, resonating with each generation that discovers them anew. Take the concept of love, for instance. In Persian poetry, love isn't just a simple emotion, it's a transformative force capable of altering reality itself. You've got poets like Hafez, turning the act of falling in love into a mystical journey, where the beloved is both a person and a metaphor for the divine. It's like getting a 2-for-1 deal at your local bazaar, earthly romance and spiritual enlightenment, all wrapped up in a single verse. No wonder these poems have been translated into dozens of languages, from French to Japanese, each translating not just words, but the very essence of human connection. And then there's the existential angst, the kind that would make even a modern-day philosopher nod in understanding. These poets were musing about the nature of existence long before it was cool, pondering questions that still keep us up at night. Who am I? Why are we here? What's the meaning of life? It's like they were the original existentialists, minus the black turtlenecks and cigarettes. Their verses serve as a reminder that while the world may change, the human condition remains stubbornly consistent. So, how did these poetic musings manage to cross the barriers of time and space, influencing modern literature as if by some literary osmosis? Well, let's credit the craft of translation and the sheer tenacity of ideas that refuse to be confined by borders. While today's bestsellers might be driven by marketing budgets and social media clout, back then it was the translators who were the unsung heroes of cultural exchange. These linguistic magicians took Persian poetry and spun it into languages that could reach new audiences, ensuring that the whispers of a 10th century poet could be heard in the libraries of Renaissance Italy or the coffee houses of Enlightenment France. And let's not forget the role of colonization with its double-edged sword of cultural exchange. When the British Empire extended its reach into the Indian subcontinent, they didn't just take tea and textiles. They also brought back manuscripts and ideas, introducing Persian poetry to a European audience hungry for the exotic. It's a testament to the resilience of these verses that they survived these transcontinental journeys, continuing to inspire and provoke thought even as they were stripped of their original context. What about the myth that poetry is somehow a lesser art form, a mere pastime for romantics with too much time on their hands? Let's squash that notion once and for all. In the grand tapestry of history, poetry has been the thread that connects us to our humanity, a way to explore the deepest recesses of the soul while navigating the complexities of the world around us. It's not a luxury, it's a necessity, a way to make sense of the chaos and find beauty in the mundane. And in our modern world, where creativity is often commodified and inspiration is measured in likes and shares, the legacy of these poets offers a counter-narrative. They remind us that true creativity isn't about conforming to trends or chasing fame. It's about digging deep, wrestling with the big questions, and finding your unique voice in a cacophony of noise. Their resilience in the face of censorship, political pressures, and economic uncertainties is a lesson for anyone who's ever felt the sting of rejection or the weight of self-doubt. Let's not overlook the economic realities that shaped these poets' lives, and, by extension, their work. Remember those 10 dirhams that could keep you fed for a month? Well, in today's terms, that's like earning minimum wage while writing the next great American novel on your lunch break. The hustle was real, and it was relentless. But it's precisely this struggle that imbued their work with a raw authenticity, a sense of urgency that transcends time and place. And here's a little secret. The constraints of their time didn't just hinder creativity, they fueled it. The necessity of veiling criticism in metaphor, of crafting verses that could be read on multiple levels, pushed these poets to innovate, to experiment with language and structure in ways that still influence writers today. It's a reminder that limitations can be the crucible in which true creativity is forged. A lesson as relevant in the boardrooms of Silicon Valley as it is in the coffee shops of Tehran. So, as you sit there, quill in hand, contemplating the next line, remember that you're not just a poet, you're part of a tradition that stretches back over a millennium, a tradition that has shaped cultures, bridged divides, and inspired countless others to find their voice. In a world that often feels fractured, where divisions seem to multiply like rabbits in spring, the words of 10th century Persian poets offer a bridge, a way to connect to something larger than ourselves. And as the sun rises, casting its golden glow over a world that's both familiar and ever-changing, you realize that the true legacy of Persian poetry isn't just in the verses themselves, but in the way they continue to inspire, to provoke thought, and to offer solace in a world that can be as unforgiving as it is beautiful. In that sense, you're not just writing poetry, you're shaping the future, one verse at a time. And isn't that the ultimate testament to creativity and resilience? The ability to transcend the limitations of your time and speak to the ages? A rooster crows, and you blink into consciousness, the first slivers of dawn creeping across the Spartan landscape. The air is crisp, and somewhere in the distance the clang of a hammer echoes, a sound as familiar as the beat of your own heart. Welcome to Sparta, 4th century BC, where the world is a raw blend of grit and glory. Though we often think of Spartans as the ultimate warriors, today you're not in the phalanx. Instead, you're headed to the forge, a place where iron meets fire and craftsmen like you shape the tools of war and peace. As a Spartan blacksmith, you're the unsung hero of this rigid society. Sure, muscle-bound soldiers get the limelight, but let's not kid ourselves, they wouldn't be much without their trusty spears and shields, right? And those don't just fall out of the sky. Nope, they're hammered and shaped, born out of the sweat and skill that you and your fellow metalworkers bring to the table. Let's debunk a common myth right off the bat. Sparta wasn't just a bunch of muscleheads swinging swords. Behind every warrior was an army of artisans, each contributing to the city-state's legendary reputation. Your day begins early. Spartan blacksmiths, like all good craftspeople, know that morning is when you seize the day by the horns, or in this case, by the tongs. You push open the wooden door of your workshop, a modest structure with a dirt floor and a roof that barely keeps out the elements. It's not much, but it's yours. You're greeted by the familiar sight of your tools, hammers, tongs, chisels, all lined up like soldiers ready for inspection. Each tool has its history, its own little saga of creation and wear, just like the weapons you forge. The forge itself is a stone beast, its mouth dark and silent for now, but soon enough it'll roar to life. You stack wood and charcoal, the essential fuel for your craft. Fun fact, charcoal production was no small feat in itself, requiring controlled burns of wood in earthen pits. Once you get the fire going, it's time to grab breakfast, a Spartan meal, quite literally. A hunk of bread, maybe some olives if you're lucky, washed down with water. It might not be a continental breakfast, but it gets the job done. With the fire crackling, you set to work on your current project, a batch of spearheads. Spartan warriors favoured the dory, a spear about 2 to 3 meters long. The spearhead, usually around 30 centimeters, needed to be sharp enough to pierce armor, but tough enough to withstand the impact of battle. This is where your skill comes in. You heat the iron until it's red hot, then shape it with precise, rhythmic hammer blows. The smell of burning metal fills the air, a scent you've grown to love, strange as it may sound. As you work, you reflect on the importance of your craft. Sparta's military strength wasn't just about brawn, it was also about having the best equipment. The Peloponnesian War, which raged from 431 to 404 BC, taught everyone a harsh lesson. Poorly made weapons could spell disaster. Your work ensures that Spartan soldiers are as well armed as they are well trained. No small pressure, right? Now, let's talk economics for a second. Blacksmithing in 4th century BC wasn't just a noble calling, it was a decent gig. Iron was a valuable commodity, and your skills were always in demand. A well-made weapon could fetch a handsome price, not to mention the respect that came with being a master of your trade. It's a common misconception that all Spartans lived in communal austerity. While it's true that citizens were expected to put the state above personal wealth, that didn't mean you were living hand to mouth. Artisans like you were an essential part of the economy, contributing to Sparta's prosperity in more ways than one. Now, here's a tidbit to keep in mind. While we often think of Sparta as a monolithic society where everyone was either a soldier or a slave, the reality was more nuanced. Craftsmen, merchants, and other tradespeople formed a crucial middle class, known as the periouikoi. They weren't full citizens, but they weren't helots either. They lived in their own communities around Sparta, contributing to its economy without participating in its political life. It's a reminder that even in a society as rigid as Sparta, there were shades of grey. As the sun climbs higher, you take a break, wiping sweat from your brow. In a world that often glamorizes the warrior, it's easy to forget the labor that goes into creating the tools of war. But you know better. Every hammer strike, every piece of metal shaped and polished, is a testament to your skill and dedication. It's a quiet, persistent kind of glory, one that doesn't need trumpets or accolades. As you prepare to plunge the latest spearhead into a cooling barrel of water, you can't help but smile at the steam that hisses up, a satisfying sign of a job well done. So, as you head into the afternoon, remember this. In a society obsessed with strength, you are the backbone, the quiet force behind the scenes. The myth of the Spartan warrior may capture the imagination, but it's the practical, unromantic reality of your work that truly built this city. And honestly, isn't the truth just a little bit more interesting? As you head into the afternoon, the forge's heat still clinging to your skin, you're acutely aware that the Spartan economy is a strange beast, one that thrives on iron both literally and metaphorically. Let's take a detour from the anvil to explore the economic dance of the 4th century BC blacksmith. Spoiler alert, it's not all about clinking coins and lavish feasts. In this era, the cost of materials like iron and bronze was nothing to sneeze at. Iron, weighing in at about 7.8 grams per cubic centimetre, was the backbone of your trade, but it wasn't exactly lying around for free. You had to source it, often from areas like Laconia or even further afield. The price fluctuated based on availability and demand, kind of like trying to buy a gaming console during a holiday rush. Trade routes snaked across the ancient world, bringing in raw materials not just from Sparta's backyard, but from places as distant as Anatolia. Bronze, on the other hand, was the luxury metal. Think of it as the ancient equivalent of today's stainless steel. With copper and tin as its main components, the costs could skyrocket, especially when tin was in short supply. Yet the demand for bronze wasn't just for gaudy trinkets. It was crucial for making armor and certain tools, and its allure was such that some Spartans might barter their prized livestock or even plots of land to get their hands on it. Talk about putting your money where your mouth is, or in this case where your shield is. Now here's the real kicker. Spartans didn't exactly have a bustling marketplace filled with clinking coins. The economy was largely based on barter, which meant you had to be a shrewd negotiator. A batch of spearheads might be swapped for a couple of goats or some grain. In this society, where martial prowess reigned supreme, your ability to forge weapons was often your best bargaining chip. You weren't just hammering out metal, you were crafting your own economic stability, one spearhead at a time. Let's debunk another myth while we're here. The romanticized version of Spartan life paints a picture of warriors living in communal harmony, sharing everything equally. Nice try, Hollywood, but the truth is murkier. While Spartan citizens did live under austere conditions, there was definitely an undercurrent of economic competition, and blacksmiths like you were at the heart of it all. You were the ones who kept the Spartan war machine humming, which meant you had a certain leverage. In a society that prioritized martial excellence, your trade was indispensable, and that gave you a unique position. Think of it this way, while the warriors were the rock stars, you were the sound technicians, the roadies. Without you, the show couldn't go on. And in a way, your work sustained the Spartan way of life, ensuring that the military had the tools it needed to maintain its legendary status. But let's not get too carried away with the heroics. The life of a blacksmith wasn't all about glory. It was hard, hot, and often thankless work. The barter system, while fascinating, wasn't exactly convenient. You had to constantly assess the value of your goods and haggle over every transaction. And for all the respect you garnered, you weren't exactly living in the lap of luxury. Remember, the perioikoi weren't full citizens, so while you were essential, you didn't get a say in the political affairs of Sparta. A bit of a raw deal, if you ask me. Yet your role was crucial. You were the lifeline that connected the military might of Sparta with the everyday realities of its economy. Without the tools you forged, there would be no warriors to wield them, no victories to be won. It's a testament to the fact that behind every great soldier is a blacksmith who made the weapon they wield, often unsung and uncelebrated. And maybe that's the true heart of Sparta. Not just the iron-tipped spear, but the iron-willed craftsman who made it. As you stoke the forge for another round of work, you can't help but appreciate the delicate balance between strength and skill, between the romantic myth of Spartan warriors and the gritty reality of the labor that supports them. It's a dance as old as time, one that weaves together the threads of economy, society, and survival. And in this intricate tapestry, you are both artist and artisan, crafting not just weapons, but the very fabric of Spartan life. So, as the sun dips lower and your day continues, remember that while the warriors might get the glory, it's your hands that shape the tools of their triumphs. And in a world obsessed with martial might, perhaps the greatest strength lies in the quiet resilience of those who forge the future, one hammer strike at a time. As the sun dips into the afternoon sky, casting a golden hue over the Spartan landscape, you find yourself deep in the rhythmic dance of hammer and anvil. It's a symphony of metal and fire, where each clang is both a heartbeat and a battle cry. You're not just a blacksmith, you're a sculptor of iron, a weaver of armor whose skills are as precise as a surgeon's scalpel. But let's not kid ourselves. This isn't some Renaissance fair where everything's polished to a shine. No, this is Sparta, 4th century BC, where you're grappling with the harsh realities of pre-industrial craftsmanship. First off, let's talk tools. Your hammer isn't a one-size-fits-all kind of deal. You've got a whole arsenal of them, small, precise hammers for detailing, and the hefty, sledge-like ones for shaping. Each has its own role, its own purpose. The anvil is your silent partner in this dance, a solid hunk of iron that weighs in at around 100 kilograms. No easy feat to move, but what it lacks in mobility, it makes up for in reliability. Your tongs, on the other hand, are your extended fingers, gripping red-hot metal like a musician would, a cherished instrument. And then there's the forge, your fiery muse, reaching temperatures upwards of 1,300 degrees Celsius. It's a hot, sweaty business, and not just because of the weather. Here's where things get interesting. The notion of Spartan weapons being flawless works of art? A bit of a stretch. Sure, they were effective, but perfection was more myth than reality. The process of crafting a spearhead or breastplate was fraught with challenges. Impurities in the iron meant that a seemingly sturdy spear could snap at the worst possible moment, like a poorly timed joke at a dinner party. And let's not forget the limitations of tools themselves. Without the precision of modern machinery, every piece of equipment had to be tested and retested, often through trial and error. You'd think this would lead to mountains of scrap metal, and you'd be right. Waste was part of the process, an accepted cost of doing business in a world where every centimetre of metal counted. Now, about that armour. The breastplate, or cuirass, was a central piece of Spartan gear. While we'd love to imagine these as shining suits of invincibility, the reality was more, shall we say, practical. Made from layers of linen and leather, reinforced with metal, these breastplates were designed to be as mobile as they were protective. Weighing anywhere between 10 to 15 kilograms, they had to balance defense with the ability to move, and fast. After all, what good is a soldier who can't keep up with the phalanx? And speaking of balance, let's dive into the technical side of things. Crafting a sword, for instance, wasn't just about heating metal and pounding it into shape. It involved a meticulous process known as quenching and tempering. This is where you, the blacksmith, showed your true mettle, pun intended. Quenching involved cooling the hot metal rapidly in water or oil, which made it hard but also brittle. Then came tempering, where you gently reheat the metal to relieve some of that brittleness, giving it the flexibility needed to withstand a fierce battle. It was a delicate dance of heat and timing, requiring a keen eye and steady hand. But let's not romanticize this too much. The reality? You were often working against the clock, trying to meet the demands of an army always on the brink of the next campaign. The pressure was immense, like trying to keep up with the latest TikTok trend while juggling flaming swords. And all this without the safety net of modern technology. If a blade cracked or an armor joint failed, it wasn't just a bad day at the office. It could mean the difference between victory and a humiliating defeat on the battlefield. In this world, the blacksmith was both artist and engineer, a master of materials who understood not just the how, but the why. Why did certain iron alloys work better than others? Why did a particular quenching technique produce a superior blade? These were questions you answered not through books or schematics, but through experience and intuition. It was a skill set honed over years of sweat and toil, passed down through generations like a family heirloom. And let's not forget the economic side of things. As afternoon light plays tricks on the smoke from your forge, you remember that each piece of armor or weapon wasn't just a tool of war. It was currency, a testament to your skill, and a measure of your worth. In a barter economy, where coins were scarce and bartering was king, the quality of your craftsmanship determined your standing. A well-made sword could be traded for livestock or grain, while a faulty one could see you out of business faster than you could say, Eureka. So here you are, in the heart of Sparta, where the myth of perfection meets the gritty reality of human endeavor. Your work is both a labor of love and a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. In a society obsessed with strength and martial prowess, perhaps it's the quiet, unyielding strength of the blacksmith that truly forged the Spartan legend. As the day wears on and the shadows lengthen, you continue to hammer away, shaping not just metal, but history itself. It's a tough, relentless world, but in the end, isn't the challenge what makes it all worthwhile? As the shadows stretch and the day inches towards evening, the forge's glow holds steady, much like your role in this complex tapestry called Sparta. It's a society that's often painted in black and white, either the warriors or everyone else. But look closer, and you'll see it's more like one of those abstract paintings that the ancients hadn't quite gotten to yet. At the heart of this intricate picture are the perioikoi, whose social standing is as fascinating as it is misunderstood. Now, let's take a moment to appreciate the perioikoi, those non-citizen inhabitants who are neither Spartans nor helots. Think of them as Sparta's middle class, indispensable but always in the background, like the bass player in a rock band. These folks didn't get a cozy seat at the political table, but their role in the economy was pivotal. They were the craftsmen, traders, and yes, blacksmiths, who made sure the Spartan war machine didn't grind to a halt. Picture this, a bustling market on the outskirts of Sparta, where perioikoi merchants haggle over goods like amphorae filled with olive oil or baskets brimming with figs. And then there's you, standing firmly in your role as a blacksmith, the quiet architect of Spartan might. Your metalwork fuels the very essence of Spartan power, its military prowess. This isn't just an economic transaction, it's the lifeblood of a society obsessed with war. Let's dig a little deeper into the perioikoi's place in the social hierarchy. While they didn't have the political clout of a full Spartan citizen, they weren't exactly living in the gutter either. They owned land, ran businesses, and were taxed for the privilege of living in the shadow of one of history's most famous military states. Sure, they didn't have voting rights or a say in the agoge, the rigorous education system that churned out Spartan warriors, but their existence was far from bleak. Think of them as the unsung middle managers, keeping the wheels turning while the warriors grabbed all the headlines. And speaking of headlines, let's address the elephant in the room, the Spartan mirage. The idea that every Spartan man was a battle-hardened warrior is about as accurate as saying every modern politician is a paragon of virtue. Spoiler alert, it's not. The reality is that the Spartan citizen warriors were heavily outnumbered by the perioikoi and helots. This demographic reality meant that the Spartan military system relied heavily on these non-citizen groups to maintain its dominance. If the perioikoi decided to down tools one day, you can bet that Spartan society would be in a world of trouble. But why didn't they? Well, that's where the understated power dynamics come into play. The perioikoi had a vested interest in maintaining the status quo. Their livelihoods depended on the stability and security provided by the Spartan military. Without it, their own safety and economic prosperity would be at risk. It's a classic example of interdependence, a delicate balance where everyone knows their role, and stepping out of line could bring the whole house of cards tumbling down. Now, let's switch gears from the socio-political to the economic. In a barter-based economy, the value of your work isn't measured in coins, but in goods and services. The spearheads you craft might be exchanged for food, raw materials, or even a favor owed. It's a system that requires a keen sense of negotiation and an understanding of value that goes beyond simple economics. You're not just trading metal, you're trading expertise, trust, and reliability. In a world where every transaction is personal, your reputation is as crucial as the quality of your work. And let's not forget the practical realities of life as a blacksmith. Every day, you're acutely aware that your work is more than just a job. It's a vital cog in the Spartan machine. The weapons you create are the very tools of Spartan dominance, and the pressure to deliver is constant. As evening descends, you're not just winding down, you're preparing for the next day, ensuring your tools are in order and the forge is ready to roar back to life. But don't be fooled into thinking this life is all about sweat and toil. There's a rhythm to it, a sense of satisfaction that comes from knowing you're part of something greater. In a society where the glory of the battlefield often overshadows everything else, your quiet contribution is what truly fuels the legend. It's a reminder that behind every famous warrior is a network of skilled craftspeople who make their victories possible. As the stars begin to dot the Spartan sky, you reflect on the day's work. The forge's heat has faded, but the warmth of accomplishment lingers. It's a life that's as challenging as it is rewarding, a testament to the resilience of those who choose the path less glorified. In a society obsessed with perfection and strength, perhaps the greatest strength lies in the quiet persistence of those who build the very foundations of greatness. So as you close the door on another day at the forge, remember this. While the myth of the Spartan warrior captures imaginations, it's the unsung efforts of the perioikoi, the craftsmen, and the blacksmiths that breathe life into those stories. And as the night settles in, there's a certain comfort in knowing that tomorrow you'll once again pick up your hammer and continue shaping not just metal, but the very essence of Spartan history. As darkness drapes over the Spartan landscape, you find yourself in the comforting quiet of your modest workshop, reflecting on the day's toil. The forge is silent now, but its warmth lingers in the air, a reminder of the fire that fuels more than just metal, it fuels an entire society's mythology. And it's here, in the afterglow, that the true weight of the blacksmith's role begins to crystallize. An unsung hero in a narrative dominated by the clang of shields and the roar of the phalanx. When we think of Sparta, it's easy to get swept up in the romanticized image of the warrior state, where every citizen supposedly lived and breathed for the art of war. But let's hit pause on that epic movie scene for a moment. The reality is, while the warriors might have been the face of Sparta, it was the blacksmiths, the perioikoi, who were its beating heart. They were the ones who ensured that the army was not only equipped, but equipped with the best, turning raw metal into the legendary tools of conquest. Consider this. A Spartan hoplite's equipment, his dory spear, Xiphos sword, and Aspis shield formed the trifecta of ancient warfare. Each piece was meticulously crafted, not just to endure, but to dominate. The process of creating a single spearhead, measuring roughly 30 centimeters, involved heating iron to a blistering 1,200 degrees Celsius, hammering it into shape, and then quenching it in water to harden it. This was no small feat. It was a labor-intensive process that demanded skill, precision, and a deep understanding of metallurgy, often requiring a full day's work for just one spearhead. Now, let's get down to brass tacks, or rather, iron ones. The economic reality of blacksmithing was as complex as the society it served. Iron wasn't just a resource, it was a currency in its own right, an asset that could make or break the Spartan economy. The scarcity of iron deposits meant that every piece was precious, each ingot a potential weapon or tool. Trade routes stretched across the ancient world, bringing in much-needed materials from as far as Anatolia, all of which were funneled into the hands of skilled blacksmiths who transformed them into instruments of war and trade. But it wasn't just about weapons. The blacksmiths crafted tools for agriculture, everyday items that kept Spartan society functioning. These artisans were the backbone of an economy that, while ostensibly focused on war, was deeply reliant on the mundane realities of production and trade. In a society where barter was more common than currency, the value of a blacksmith's craft was measured in more than just material wealth. It was measured in survival, both economic and literal. And then there's the myth of the Spartan warrior, that enduring image of invincibility and discipline. It's a powerful narrative, one that continues to capture imaginations today. But here's the kicker. It's a myth built on the foundations laid by those who worked in the shadows, the perioikoi who forged the very tools that enabled Spartan victories. Without the blacksmith's tireless efforts, the vaunted Spartan war machine might have been little more than a paper tiger, all roar and no bite. This brings us to the crux of the matter. How much of Sparta's legendary status is truly its own, and how much is owed to the anonymous artisans who shaped its destiny? It's a question that doesn't just apply to Sparta, but echoes throughout history. We love to celebrate the heroes, the frontline warriors, but often overlook those in the background, the craftsmen and labourers who make the heroics possible. It's a reminder that history is not just written by the victors, but by those who forge the tools of victory. So as you sit in the stillness of your workshop, the day's work etched in the lines of your hands, you realize that your legacy, while perhaps not written in the annals of history, is nonetheless indelible. It's there in every weapon wielded by a Spartan soldier, in every piece of armor that turns a blow, in every tool that tills the fields. It's a legacy of skill, dedication, and the quiet strength that underpins even the mightiest of legends. In the end, the story of Sparta is as much about those who crafted its tools as those who wielded them. It's a narrative shaped by the interplay of myth and reality, where the glamorous sheen of the warrior's armor hides the gritty, unromantic truth of the labor that supports it. And perhaps, As you close the door on another day, it's comforting to know that while the world may remember the warriors, it's the blacksmiths who truly forge their legacy. As the night deepens and the stars flicker like distant forges in the sky, you find solace in the knowledge that tomorrow, and for many tomorrows to come, your work will continue to shape the world in ways both seen and unseen. In a society obsessed with martial prowess, it's the quiet, enduring resilience of the blacksmith that sustains the legend, forging not just weapons, but the very essence of what it means to be Spartan. And that, my friend, is a legacy as unyielding as iron itself.